reaching out to brush a tear from my face. All thoughts escaped me as I watched him bring the tear to his lips. He licked it off. There. Now we can share the bad day. That might work on me. I ain't gonna lie. Hey, thank you for clicking on the video. My name is Kaylee, and this is Read, Rant, Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. Today, we are talking about book number 2, The Wrong Pucking Guy, in the Pucking Wrong series by C.R. Jane. If you are unfamiliar, I'm sure that you have seen The Wrong Pucking Number by C.R. Jane. This is the first in the series. Very, very popular dark hockey romance book and dark hockey romance series. If you have not read the first book, Natalie from Weirdo Book Club has done a phenomenal rant review about that, and I highly recommend that you watch that. Natalie is phenomenal. She's actually, her and Rachel from Rachel Reads are who really inspired me to actually create this channel and start doing this. So I cannot recommend them enough. They're both wonderful, wonderful people. I am a hockey fan. If you can't tell, this is a Blues jersey, St. Louis, Missouri, the Blues team. I just got back from a game tonight. In light of being a hockey fan, I wanted to do a dark romance regarding that, and of course, the series by C.R. Jane is the most popular. I'm not going to do the first one because I have watched Natalie's so much that I would just end up inadvertently stealing her commentary or bits, you know what I mean? It's so ingrained in my brain because I've probably watched that video 5 times. That's my default background noise. All of her videos are. So I didn't think that was appropriate. So instead I was like, oh, let's do the second book in the series. Let's do something new and fun. Technically, this is a standalone, so if you have not read the first book or watched her video, that's totally fine. You can still watch this and get something out of it. I will give you a little quick synopsis about the first book, though, just to contextualize some of the people that we're going to reference and some of the events. But technically, it is a standalone novel. That was a very, very long intro to say that The Pucking Wrong Guy by C.R. Jane was published in September of 2023, and it is currently, as of filming, sitting at a 4.01 with 25,000 ratings on Goodreads. Not a very popular book in terms of ratings. I don't think people really continued the series. So I'm here for you, homie. If you read the first book and you were like, I wonder what happened with Ari Lancaster, I'm here for you, bestie. Before we begin, though, I do have the same 3 disclaimers that I have on all of my videos. The first one being, this is not for C.R. Jane. It's not for friends, fans, family, stans, anything like that. These reviews are for readers. Disclaimer number 2 is that this review will contain all of the spoilers. This will be a beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown of this book. And disclaimer number 3 is a content or trigger warning. I'm going to read you what C.R. Jane has at the opening of the book because it's actually I was happy with it, okay? They say, "Dear readers, please be aware that this is a darker style romance and as such can and will contain possible triggering content. Elements of this story are purely fantasy and should not be taken as acceptable behavior in real life. Our love interest is possessive, obsessive, and that golden retriever stalker you have been waiting for. Ari Lancaster will do what it takes to get his girl." That's all I want. All I ask, if you have watched any of my other rant reviews, you have heard me complain about it very heavily. Romance novels these days, and especially dark romance, really romanticizing and normalizing abusive behavior without proper acknowledgement or commentary that what they're writing about is not cool. That's all I ask for. Just give me that little paragraph that just says, before you begin, hey, what you're about to read is actually really fucked up if this happens to you in real life. This is just for fun and this is just fake. And if this happens to you in real life, you should seek help. That's all I want, man. So because C.R. Jane provided that disclaimer at the very beginning, she can do whatever she wants now. Within a certain confine, and I'm cool with it. I'm actually happy. I can read this book and I can provide a rant review that isn't just me being angry. The actual trigger warnings, though. Themes include ice hockey, which is sure a choice, and I'm not being dismissive. That's very inappropriate to put in a trigger warning thing, don't get me wrong. But if we're going to say themes include ice hockey, I feel like we should really also say that themes include Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, Tay-Tay, T-Swift is referred to and said her songs directly cited more than 10 times in this book. Anyway, onto the actual stuff. Stalking, manipulation, dark obsessive themes, sexual scenes. Our MC, main character, has issues with self-hate, self-harm, an eating disorder, and trauma from her parents' death is alluded to and described. Cheating is involved, but not between the main love interests. There are no harems or sharing involved. Ari Lancaster has only eyes for her. Prepare to enter the world of the LA Cobras. You've been warned. That really covers most of it. Talk of self-unaliving as well, which is not mentioned on here, which I feel like is a pretty big deal. And like very, very heavy emphasis throughout the entirety of the book of the whole self-harm and like self-hatred in general. I will heavily gloss over a lot of that in this review because I won't say it's excessive. I don't feel like that's necessarily appropriate, but I don't think there's any other term that I could use other than that. Like, it is brought up a lot, and it is brought up in a lot of detail. And so if you do choose to read this book, I just want to give you a heads up about that. Hey man, I get it. Yo, I ain't gonna lie, that shit was hard for me to read. Like, there were times in this book where I said, ugh. So if you gotta click off this video, that's fine. Protect your peace. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you in the next one, okay? With all of that being said, hey, we talked about the book so far, okay? Give me like 30 seconds to like self-promote, okay? I post all my videos on Spotify, so if you're watching this on YouTube, go to Spotify if you need to. Like, that stuff's all there. And if you're on Spotify listening to this right now, hey, thanks for checking me out. I appreciate you guys. And then lastly, so now I am regularly getting monetization checks. I got my first one on December 21st. I made a $50 donation to Rant. And then going forward, I will be donating a portion of the revenue that I get from this channel to such organizations. So keep an eye out for that. You can vote on where we donate next. I'll probably be posting that on like the 15th of every month. And then every Friday or Saturday, I will post a poll for the community to vote on what I review next. What gets added to the lineup? What are we going to be talking about? And otherwise, let's get into it. So first things first, like I said, this book is technically a standalone, but I do want to give you a super brief synopsis of the first book, The Wrong Puking Number. In The Puking Wrong Number, we are introduced to Monroe Bardot. She is a 17-year-old girl who watched her mother pass away and was then placed into a series of very abusive foster homes. Yeah, dude, if there's anything that C.R. Jane does, she opens these books hitting hard, hitting crazy with some backstories. Something happens at that final foster home that I don't want to say out loud that leads to her running away a couple of weeks before her 18th birthday. She runs from Houston, Texas to Dallas, Texas, and then after a very, very rough start, she starts a new life. She's grinding, she's hustling, she's doing what she can to start fresh and be this like very strong, independent woman. And then we have Lincoln Daniels. Lincoln Daniels is the star player for the Dallas Knights, which is the professional hockey team. He's moody, he's broody, he's a little bit not goody. He accidentally texts Monroe's number, instantly falls for her, and then starts stalking her obsessively. He gets her fired from her jobs. He gets her kicked out of her apartment. He all but kidnaps her to keep her with him, like to force her to move in with him and stay with him. And it's a lot. Especially because she's like a freshly 18 baby who's very, very vulnerable, coming from very, very vulnerable situations, and is like ultimately forced into this relationship with this man that she can't escape. And he has like millions of dollars, and like, it's just bad. It's just, it's this the whole time. It's not good. It's not great. It's very scary. Like, it's very uncomfortable. This story, Ari Lancaster, who is our main male character in this book, he is best friends with Lincoln Daniels. Ari Lancaster used to play for the Dallas Knights until this book that we'll get into. But Lincoln and Monroe and the Dallas Knights will make like repeated appearances in this book. So I just want you guys to know that. And then also that Lincoln stalked Monroe heavily. That also plays a very large role in this book. Sadly, or greatly if you're into it, I don't know. We open this book with a heavy hitter backstory for the main female character. I've read the third book in the series, and it's the same thing. It is just like, yeah, damn, this poor girl. In this prologue, we're introduced to Layla. Layla is getting admitted to an orphanage after her father unalived her mother in front of her. Layla then goes on to detail how crazy this situation is. And it really hits her, right? That like her life will not be the same, that things are totally different, that it's horrible, that like, you know, she only has a teddy bear to her name. Everything else she had to leave behind at the house. And she starts to have a panic attack. Understandably so. She runs outside and a little boy comes up to her and comforts her. He says, "Deep breath, Angel. You're doing great." She's 10, he's 12. Very good coping skills for a 12-year-old boy, by the way. But there is a description of him that I do love. It says, "There was a smudge of dirt on his cheek and his grin was wide, like he knew a million secrets and couldn't wait to share all of them. His lips curved up with a natural feeling of confidence that I had never seen in someone." I'm Ari, by the way. My voice wavered as I replied, "Layla." "Layla," he repeated, holding out his hand to help me off the ground. I stared at it for a long minute, not understanding why taking it seemed like such a big decision. When I finally reached out and grabbed it, my fate was sealed. I just didn't know it yet. Uh-oh. We go into chapter 1, and Layla, now known as Blake, how old is she? I don't know. It's literally never said. So we're told the ages, sorry, side tangent. So we're told the ages when they're at this orphanage, right? Ari's 12, Layla's 10. We're in the future, sometime in the future, who knows? I'm going to assume like mid 20s. It's literally never one singular time is it referenced. Like, anyway, so Layla got adopted from this orphanage and she lives in New York now. She gets a phone call from her agent. Her agent says, "Oh my God, girly pop, you landed like a super great modeling gig in LA. Aren't you so excited? This is life-changing information. This is so crazy." Blake is super excited. And then it all comes crashing down when she gets a phone call from her boyfriend, Clark. Clark is calling her to ask if she is ready for the gala that they have that night. It's like a fundraising event that her adoptive parents are hosting. And she's like, "Yeah, babe, totally." Which then cues a self-hatred spiral. Like a very, very detailed, "Oh my God, I'm so hideous. I hate myself," self-hatred spiral, which is not very fun to read. But she does get ready for the event that night. She puts on the gown, she hops on the elevator, and she's going downstairs to meet with Clark to drive to said event. And she's thinking to herself about her gown. Its beauty was a reminder of the life that I'd been thrust into, one of glamour and perfection that I had never lived up to. My adoptive mother had expected refinement, and the fashion world had only reinforced it. Tonight, like so many other nights, it felt like I was wearing a costume, one that didn't quite fit. I should be used to it. I felt like that from the moment that the Shepfields picked me up from that group home, changed my name, my identity, my world. Perfection was the decree in that cold mansion they'd taken me to, woven into every corner like a delicate but unyielding thread. The only imperfection allowed was that Mara Shepfield couldn't have children, hence the need for me. From the moment I entered that world, her impossible standards enveloped me, shaping my existence into a mosaic of precise expectations that went against everything my mom and dad had taught me. I was stuck in an intricate web spun from her vision of what life should be. Clark picks her up and she's reflecting on this feeling of like, it's kind of inadequacy, like this like inherent inadequacy, but also just like not belonging, imposter syndrome, very just like, ugh, all these rich people doing these like rich people fancy things, and I'm just like, I'm not comfortable, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be a part of this. Clark falls into that category, and so when he picks her up and takes her to this party, you know, they get out of the car, there's all this paparazzi there, it's all like the New York socialites and like elites. She's just feeling all out of sorts. They get inside and they approach her adoptive parents, and immediately the mom, Maura, is talking mad crap, like commenting like, "Oh, I guess you didn't take the makeup artists that I recommended. I guess you didn't use like the designers that I told you that you should." Ugh. So she starts freaking out, right? Again, understandably so. Runs off to the bathroom. When she's in the bathroom, having a little bit of a cry, having a little bit of self-hatred spiral, right? That was the voice of confirmation to all of the bad voices in her head. Another person walks into the bathroom, and it is this woman, Michelle. She walks in, and it is her best frenemy. That's not my word, that's her word. Her best frenemy, Michelle. Michelle then continues to talk super crap about the way that Blake looks. Essentially just calling her ugly and that her dress is too tight and like blah, 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 picking out all of these imperfections. Michelle was at the orphanage with her, which is what I don't understand. I'm like, y'all, you're telling me y'all were in the trenches, the literal trenches together, and you're gonna be frenemies? It's weird to me. There's no healthy. We're gonna side again. In these dark romance novels, I feel like there is never any healthy female relationships, and there's never any healthy relationships with the main character, like the main female character's mom. Which, like, hey, same, but also, is that like a prerequisite? I feel like that's like a prerequisite to the genre. It's like every single book, bro. I'm like, homie, can we please have like one healthy home life, one healthy relationship with the mother, one healthy relationship with the father? Like, can we have like one normal fucking parent relationship, a friend group, a support system, please, for the love of God. For the love of God. Anyway, Michelle continues to like humiliate her. She feels terrible about it. She eventually tries to play it off. She ends up leaving, and when she goes back out to the gala, Mara is up there giving a whole speech about like, we're here to raise money for the underprivileged children, and every penny that you donate will change a life one day, and it's like phenomenal, the things that we're doing. And she's just sitting there. Blake is just sitting there, and she's like, this bitch. I'd never forget her pouring her iced coffee on a small boy who had asked her for money in Central Park, right? And so then, at the very end of Mara's speech, Clark stands up. Blake's boyfriend, right? Longtime boyfriend. He stands up. And he asks Blake to marry him. I stared at him kneeling there for a moment. I was tempted to say yes. It would be so much easier. But then my thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the life he was asking me to accept. Maybe he would love me. Maybe he'd even do his best to make me happy. But this life would only lead to loneliness masked by grandeur. I would crumble under the weight of it, and I'd never stop being lonely. I'd never stop yearning for something more. My fingers clenched at the sight of the ring. I knew the cold metal of it would feel like an anchor dragging me into a deep sea of despair. She says, I can't. And she runs. With every step, the weight of my decision grew lighter, the whispers of the gala fading into the distance as I embraced the possibility of a different future, one where happiness was a possibility. We open chapter 2 with Ari moving to California. He has officially left the Dallas Knights and he has joined the LA Cobras. He's about to go into his first practice and he's feeling a little nervous. He's feeling a little weird. So he calls his best buddy, Lincoln Daniels, the guy from the last book, the lead heartthrob guy on the Dallas Knights. They have a bit of a back and forth conversation. The season's going to be weird. I swallowed because now wasn't the time to get all emotional about the fact that I'd given up my dream life to spend a year in California to get my dream girl. Okay, it was worth it. 1 year, I said. 1 year, he answered. He goes on inside, and we're introduced to all of the players on the team. None of them are really important other than two. We have Soto, who, does he suck at hockey? I don't know. Do they just say he sucks because they don't like him? Maybe. He's just a douchebag and they're beefing, and I don't think it ever actually explains why they don't like each other. For example, Soto sighed and he held out his hand to me. Truce? He suddenly offered, and honestly, keeping the laughter in was all I could do because never would that happen. I acted like I was considering it and started extending my hand before abruptly yanking it back. Sorry, Soto. I can't even pretend to like you. Soto's face curled up in a snarl as he dropped his fake-ass peace offering. Fuck you, Lancaster. I winked at him. Sorry, not without dinner first. Your tiny dick would be so forgettable that I'd have to at least get a steak out of it. And then we're introduced to Walker, who is the only other notable character. He is the goalie for the LA Cobras, and he is also the main male love interest in the third book in the series. In chapter 3, the huge photo shoot that Blake had landed, the whole reason, her big breakthrough, the reason that she moved to LA, fell through. The editor in charge of that magazine had gotten caught up in a sexual harassment scandal, so they canceled the entire campaign. She's kind of thankful, you know what I mean? She's like, okay, well, maybe I dodged a bullet there, but still. So now she has fallen into the trap that most models fall into, where now she's just waiting tables, just hoping for other gigs. So she's waiting tables at this very fancy, 5-star, bougie-ass restaurant where all the A-list celebrities go to, and it's a good chance for her to network a little bit, kind of get her face seen. And then meanwhile, Clark has been blowing up her phone, begging to talk, saying that he loves her, that he'll do anything to make it work. And at some point during her shift, Ari Lancaster shows up and asks to sit in her section. But she doesn't know hockey, so she doesn't know who this man is. She has absolutely no idea who this guy is. She just notes how everybody and their mom is freaking out about him and staring at him and checking him out. Like, even the A-list celebrities that are in there are like really involved with who this guy is, so it's kind of piqued her interest. What's also piqued her interest is that he's like really hot, and she is freaked out by that, I guess, like freaked out by her sudden instant attraction to him, that she delays going to his table as long as she can. And when she finally goes over there, "Hi," he murmured, and my panties were freaking soaked. His voice was a sensual caress, a velvety whisper that sent shivers dancing along my skin. I opened my mouth several times to respond, but I was worried all that would come out was a moan. Jesus Christ. "Hi," I finally stuttered, inwardly wincing at how freaking lame I was. My phone buzzed against my thigh, reminding me that I had a sweet, sexy boyfriend. I had a feeling that the man lounging in front of me could do far more damage to my heart than Clark ever could. Not that there was a chance in flying hell that this kind of guy would ever be interested in me. I mean, what had I been saying? It's so cringy. And she goes on for another 3 paragraphs talking about how handsome this stranger is, and she just can't get enough of him, and ends her portion of this chapter thinking, "Yet here before me was the living embodiment of that fantasy, a stranger who you knew that one night with him could be the stuff of dreams, an unforgettable encounter that would leave you breathless and forever changed. You have a boyfriend," a voice in my head screamed. I understood that. It's just I was having trouble remembering his name at the moment. Oh my God. Ew. I hate that so much. She takes his order and he's like talking about how he can't breathe. She's also the hottest thing that he's ever seen. And it's a gravitational pull, and everybody's just staring at her because she's so hot. And it's just like, oh, okay, guys, I get the point. He's thinking to himself, "It felt like I could breathe for the first time since I'd seen that billboard and realized that it was her. Like, I'd been holding my breath since she disappeared on me as a kid, and now I was free to exhale." I'd been driving along a Dallas road. The city skyline stretched out before me, a sprawling maze of buildings and lights that seemed to go on forever. As I approached an intersection, my gaze wandered to the billboards lining the roadside. Advertising for everything from fast food to luxury cars flashed by, each one vying for the attention of passing motorists. But then, one particular billboard seized my attention, causing me to slam on the brakes in disbelief. There she was, larger than life, an embodiment of over a decade of wishing and longing. It was some kind of perfume ad. I'd immediately known that it was her, Layla, the girl that I'd lost, the only girl that I'd ever loved. So he did everything he could, to track her down. And he found out from Google that he found out her name. It was Blake Shepfield, which is not Layla, whatever her last name was prior. And so that's why he could never find her when he tried finding her before, because technically she didn't exist anymore. But with a little help from Lincoln's creepy private investigator, or PI, I'd then found that Blake had been adopted and was living in New York City all these years, and that she'd had changed her name legally upon adoption. Finally, I guess they're able to get over their attraction enough to actually speak English to each other, and he places his order. He asks for a refill on his water. I pushed my glass farther away, and that made it so that she had to lean over the table to pour my water so I could more easily slip the phone from her pocket I'd seen her looking at a few minutes ago. Years of pickpocketing as a kid on the streets made it easy. She didn't even notice. She goes away to go and help other people, and I scrolled through her contacts, inwardly raging when I saw how many times that Clark, the boyfriend I'd found out about through the PI, had called and texted today. I blocked his number and then made a new contact with my number labeled Clark. A second later, I was downloading the tracking app the PI had told me about onto her phone. It would also allow me to see any messages that she sent or received, as well as her app activity. I blocked Clark in her social media apps for good measure. Perfect. I knew today was going to be a good day. What I'd just done, what I would do to get her, weren't things I'd seen on my dream board, but hey, you worked with what you had. He starts making a little bit of small talk with her, and they're both talking about how they're new to the city, and he says, "Well, you know what? I just moved here too. That means we should be BFFs." This time a real smile popped across her face and she snorted. I gave myself another inward fist bump because I believed in celebrating victories. BFFs, huh? Yes, I'm a really good BFF. Everyone says so. Oh, so you're BFFs with everyone then? Well, no, actually, I only have one BFF right now, but he assures me that I'm the best. But I really think I'm up for the task, is what I'm saying. I can't believe that we've said BFF this many times in a row. Her boss comes over and her boss is yelling at her for wasting time or fanning over him, I guess. And he's like, "No, it's cool. She's great. She's great. Here's a huge tip. She did phenomenal." In chapter 4, we're back to Blake's perspective. It's 3 days later, and Clark has suddenly only been responding with yeses and nos and emojis, if he even texts her at all. For the most part, he's really not been texting her. I couldn't help but think that the universe was coming after me, punishing me for getting all hot and bothered over a guy besides my sweet boyfriend. Gross. She gets home, though, after another grueling day at work. Her roommate, Charlotte, is there dancing to Karma by Taylor Swift. Again, Taylor Swift gets mentioned a lot in this book. Charlotte got 2 tickets to the opening game for the Dallas Knights that night and invites Blake to it. She's like, I know that like you've been working really, really hard and you never ever go out, you never party, like you should come to the game with me. A reluctant smile graced my lips. All right, I'll go, I began to say before crashing to the floor as she tackled me. My ears would never recover from her squeals. It's very cute, and I was very excited for like a close female friendship. I was like, yeah, finally, like good female relationships in one of these books. Don't get very excited, it doesn't last very long. Ari's perspective, same chapter, it is hockey time. It's opening night, and he's feeling a little funky about being there and not with his team in Dallas. Like, this is all new people, all new everything, and he's just feeling funky. So he ends up texting Lincoln and Monroe. They give him some encouragement, a little bit of back and forth. And what really helps, though, is that the Disney prince, that is what he calls Walker the goalie, says, I know you must be feeling weird, so is there anything that you and Lincoln used to do before the game that you would want to do with me? Oh, this is good. I practically jumped up with excitement. Yes, I exclaimed, unable to contain my enthusiasm. Oh, okay, what is it? And it essentially turns into... I grabbed my phone and pulled up my Shake It Off playlist, cranking the volume to the max. Taylor Swift's infectious beat filled the room, and I launched into an exaggerated shimmy that would make every Swiftie proud. Walker hesitated for a moment and then got into it. His awkward moves slowly morphed into a goofy dance, and soon enough we were both grooving like nobody was watching. But when the other team members come into the locker room, he stops dancing, and Walker keeps dancing, and so then everybody is just like laughing at the dude. It was a joke, it was a prank, I guess, if you want to call it that, but it does end up becoming a reoccurring thing between them, so I don't know. You have your own opinions about that, I guess. In chapter 5, we are still in Ari's POV. They're going out onto the ice for practice, and he spots Blake. I scanned the seats where Blake was supposed to be, but she was fashionably late, leaving a conspicuous gap in the crowd, or maybe she wasn't going to come. No, I'd been assured by my contact at Blake's agency that her roommate would be as persuasive as she needed to be if the tickets came with the condition that she had to bring Blake. So we're starting hot with the deception here. As they're about to start the game, Walker, always the motivator, slapped me on the ass and threw out a "slay, baby." I blinked at him in disbelief. Did you just tell me to slay? I asked, my eyebrow arched. He grinned. Seemed like something Lincoln would say, you know? Get the vibe going? I couldn't help but shake my head, my expression deadpan. Lincoln is much cooler than that, Walker. He would be shook if he was with us right now. Oh, Walker said glumly, his features falling like I'd spit in his ice cream. I patted Walker's rear and I gave him a nice nod of appreciation. Thanks though, buddy, I said before gliding on the ice. It's the whole book. So, he's on the ice. Blake is there. They make eye contact, and she's staring at him in total shock, her eyes wide and surprised and, dare I say, excited. At least she remembered me. I would have been quite disappointed if in the 3 days' time I'd been forgotten. Not that it'd been 3 days since I'd seen her. You can bet your bottom lip that I was catching as many glimpses of her as I could. I'd been past the restaurant twice today just to get my fix. Now I understood why Lincoln was such a fan of that little app. My BFF was brilliant. I winked at her and blew a kiss, snorting with how freaking red that she got. They go on to keep playing. Bunch of hockey talk. Bunch of hockey stuff. The game ends, Ari scores the final goal, and it's a win. Yay! I think the only other thing to note during that time of the game is that Soto body checks him. They just have a lot more, like, talking between each other for some reason. I don't understand. I don't get it. We cut to Blake's POV, and she's trying to play off, like, Charlotte is freaking out. She's like, oh my god, how does he know you? How he winked at you, like he blew you a freaking kiss, dude. Like, be honest with me, like you guys know each other. She's trying to be like, no, we barely talked, like it was just a really short meeting at this restaurant. I sounded nonchalant, but inside I was a different story. I was replaying the moment when his eyes locked onto mine, the wink he'd given, the blown kiss, and obsessing/freaking out over the fact that his name was Ari. My first crush was a boy named Ari, but there was no way this was the same guy. Kids from the group home didn't end up becoming star hockey players. He'd been 12 when we'd met, and that Ari didn't play hockey. It was a miracle that I'd been adopted at 10. Ari being adopted after I'd left would have been even rarer. Not because he wasn't incredible, but because people didn't usually want older kids, not unless they had a motive, and there weren't any kids at that place playing sports. It was just a weird coincidence. I said, girl, I swear to God, I'm about to start calling you rocks. If you haven't watched my Punk 57 review, you should. That book was wild. I'll put the little link up in a bunch of these notes. I was calling this bitch rocks. It's so bad. Anyway, at the end of the game, Blake and Charlotte are approached by an arena employee and said that they have been invited to the locker room. And the employee is like, yeah, like, you're pretty lucky, ladies, on opening night. Like, you know, there's like some insinuation there. And she feels pretty gross about it. So she's like, Charlotte, where did you say that you got these tickets from again? Charlotte doesn't answer her. Whether she didn't hear her or whether she didn't answer on purpose, Blake is not sure. But they continue into the locker room. It's a bunch of half-naked men. And Soto immediately tries talking to them, gets Charlotte's attention, and then Charlotte and Soto end up flirting while Ari and Blake continue their conversation. Soto glanced at me over Charlotte's head. You two coming out with us tonight to celebrate the big win? Yep. Charlotte's all but squealed right at the same time that I said no. Aw, come on, Blake. I need my bestie with me, Ari said. What do you say, BFF? Gonna help me celebrate? Okay. Ari gave a fist pump, and then another freakishly attractive man with light brown hair was slinging an arm around his shoulder. Let's get drunk, he yelled, and the whole locker room cheered in agreement. So they go to drive to a club to go and party. She's in the front seat with Ari, and then Walker is in the back seat. She texts Clark, her boyfriend, to say hello, apologize, remind herself that she has a boyfriend, something. And as she's doing so, Ari's voice interrupted my thoughts and I jolted in my seat. Who you texting? He asked, his tone casual. I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing, clearing my throat. I tried to sound as nonchalant as he did. Just my boyfriend. And I couldn't help but feel self-conscious. Boyfriend, huh? I knew you were too pretty to be single. He lives in New York. I've been with him since I was 16. He's the son of the my parents' friends. Can't be too smart, not following you out to Cali. Who knows what might be waiting to scoop you up. He runs SEC Media with his father. It keeps him quite busy. I said lamely, not adding that I'd recently obliterated his heart. If you were my girl, there wouldn't be anything that would keep me away. I choked on some spit in my mouth, so shocked at what he seemed to be insinuating. Good thing I have a new bestie to keep me safe. Ari chuckled low. Yeah, that's a good thing, sunshine. Walker and Ari went back to talking about the game, leaving me shaking in my seat for the rest of the drive, and Clark never texted me back. In chapter 6, they're at the club, partying it up, and oh my gosh, Ari suddenly screeched, sounding like the epitome of a tween girl as I was dragged to the right toward a very attractive-looking couple standing at the other bar in the room. Their expressions brimmed with amusement as if they were no strangers to Ari's animated entrances. You came, Ari cried, his voice almost emotional as he threw an arm around the golden-haired dreamboat that we'd been headed toward and hugged him tight. The man chuckled and clapped Ari on the back, who was still holding on to me with his other hand, by the way. Once again, I tried to pull away, but he wasn't having it. It's Lincoln and Monroe from the previous book. They came to visit and celebrate him for this opening night, and Lincoln and Monroe are obviously very kind to Blake. Lincoln repeated slowly, a glint of surprise and admiration on his face as his gaze flipped from me to Ari. Is this the girl who stole my first best friend spot? He sounded like he'd heard of me before, but would Ari really have talked to me to his best friend after a random encounter at a restaurant? They have a little bit more back and forth, more bromance between the two, and then Walker comes up. And Walker has, Lincoln's a big deal, so he's a little fangirly about it. And, hey guys, he said, his voice adorably nervous. Ari sighed and rubbed a hand across his face as if he were pained. Lincoln, meet your number one puck slut, Mr. Disney Prince himself, Walker. Walker groaned and turned to leave before Ari reached out and grabbed his shirt with a laugh. Come here, buddy. We need to tell Lincoln about our new pre-game ritual. And as the guys are all talking about the game, Ari's hands are starting to wander a little bit. They're going a little bit lower on her hip. I felt like it fit there against him like that, but then Clark's face flashed in my mind. The sour taste of guilt was once again flooding me as memories of the past hit me hard. And I'm not going to detail it, but she has a very vivid, descriptive flashback to when she tried to unalive herself, and Clark is the one who saved her and carried her to the hospital. Okay, so she's always kind of felt indebted to him in a way, that he had seen her at her worst and then chose to still stay with her. And so she's like, yeah, obviously, he loves me. He's a great guy. How could I not be with him? Ari's like, hey, are you good? She runs off into the bathroom, and when she looks in the mirror, gone was the haunted, hollow look that had followed me for so long. The exhaustion that had etched deep lines under my eyes had seemingly vanished. Instead, I saw the face that was alive, vibrant, and, dare I say it, happy. I shook my head, heart racing like a hummingbird's wings as I splashed some cool water on my face, attempting to calm the storm swirling in my chest. What in the heck? Dude, you talked to a guy one time, haven't even exchanged phone numbers. You watch him play hockey. You guys sat in a car together for like 20 minutes. Y'all are there now, and already life-changing happiness over this? This is nonsense. She leaves the bathroom after debating texting Clark. She decides ultimately that like she needs to set some boundaries with Ari, but when she steps outside of the bathroom, he's right there waiting for her. The way that he was staring at me, it was like he wanted to eat me alive. Like he was starstruck by my mere presence. Like I was his good thing in life. Ari, we can only be friends. Yeah, Sunshine? Why is that? Because I have a boyfriend. You should probably put him on notice then, Sunshine. Of what? Of the fact that he's about to lose his girl. Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I hate cheaters, but it's a little hot. It's kind of a hot thing to say. And then he kisses her. They end up like making out in the hallway of this club. In chapter 7, we go to Ari's perspective, and he's watching on his phone, the little tracker app. He's stalking her as she's taking the Uber back to her house. He's thinking about how this is the last night that he will ever let her run away, and that he's obsessed with her, and like he just has to have her. And his PI calls. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my reverie. It was a text from the PI that I'd hired to help me find Blake. He was also looking into Blake's boyfriend. Actually, I was going to start calling him Blake's other, because I couldn't take the thought of anyone other than me having the title of her boyfriend. Ew. I opened the message, hoping for anything that would help me out. The text read, "Boyfriend is squeaky clean. Word on the street is that he's not giving up on Blake. He's told everyone that she's the love of his life. He just landed in LA this evening. Return flight tomorrow for an important meeting." Okay, so he's freaking out a little bit over this and goes to Lincoln and asks for advice. The following shenanigans is all at the hands of Lincoln, okay? Blake gets home and she's thinking about the kiss and how it lit her on fire and she wants more of him when she's about to go inside and she hears Clark call her name just outside of her apartment. She's like, WTF? He's like, yeah, of course I'm here. You've been ignoring me. He's like, I haven't been ignoring you. What are you talking about? Like, you've been ignoring. And then there's a knock at the door and it's police officers. The police officers are like, are you the one driving the Audi R8 that he had rented? He says, yes. The cops say, we got a tip and there's a bunch of drugs in there. You're under arrest. What the fuck? He is arrested and hauled off. Shut up. Don't question the logistics, okay? But he's hauled off and all she can think of is that she's thankful that he didn't kiss her. Ugh. Chapter 8 opens with Blake remembering the night that her parents died, and she wakes up very freaked out, understandably so. It had been 4 days since the hockey game and Clark's abrupt arrest, and we hadn't spoken on the phone. On the phone? Oh my god. So I didn't say it earlier. Hey, Kaylee Lore, I love hockey. I've always loved hockey, but part of that comes from part of my family is from North Dakota, and I lived in North Dakota for a little while. So you hear it every now and then. It slips when I say like about if I don't watch myself. So if you're ever watching my videos and you're like, dude, why does she sound like that? It's from that. Like, my family's from way up north. I grew up in the South. I'm in the Midwest now. And then just in general, I grew up with a lot of friends that like English was not their first language. Like, they spoke usually Spanish at home. And so I've picked up on some weird Kaylee specific dialect. Anyway, it had been 4 days since the hockey game and Clark's abrupt arrest, and we hadn't spoken on the phone. Ed, Clark's lawyer, had been the one to relay the information about Clark's release and his subsequent flight back to New York. The terse text messages that Clark had sent in response to my attempts at conversation since then hadn't gotten us anywhere. It felt like he was somehow blaming me for what happened, even though I didn't know how he could come to that conclusion. Still, the unease festered beneath my skin, making it difficult to concentrate on anything else. So then Charlotte stumbles in. She's still like half hungover, half drunk from the party that she went to last night. And apparently it was a hockey party. And she makes a comment about how she ran into Ari last night and how he was real cozied up with another girl. She tries to play it off and talk herself internally out of being upset over the situation, but she is a little pissy. I entered the audition room hours later and she is auditioning for a modeling gig, gets some really negative feedback, and it sparks a self-hatred spiral. She goes through these a lot in this book. So as this is happening, she gets to the end of it and decides to leave early because she's beginning to have a panic attack, ends up down an alleyway. As I huddled against the alley's cold, graffitied walls, the panic reached its peak. I trembled uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face as I struggled to catch my breath. I felt as though the world had turned against me, but in that dark, secluded space, I found a moment of respite, a fleeting escape from the relentless scrutiny that had nearly brought me to my knees. Blake? A concerned, familiar voice from somewhere nearby called. And it's Ari. Ari shows up at the mouth of the alleyway and approaches her and asks her if she's okay, like what's going on, like oh my god. Just a bad day, I finally squeaked. This looks like a lot more than a bad day, but we can go with that story if it makes you feel better. He said, reaching out to brush a tear from my face. All thoughts escaped me as I watched him bring the tear to his lips. He licked it off, and he seemed to savor the taste. There. Now we can share the bad day, he murmured with a wink, completely unrepentant for the weird as hell thing that he had just done. A shocked cough came out of me, but part of me also felt a little bit better because now it did kind of feel like we were connected. That might work on me. I ain't gonna lie. That's weird as shit, but that might work on me. Anyway, he whisks her away into his fancy car, and they have a bunch of banter in the car, talking about besties and how he's gonna, like, take care of her, and when he sits her down, he, like, reaches over and buckles her seatbelt for her. I'm only doing my bestie duties, he said seriously as he clicked it into place. Lincoln must really enjoy this part of the friendship. Oh, no doubt, it's the best part for him for sure. That's kind of funny, right? Like, some of this is kind of funny. Like, some of it's a little goofy, cringy, quirky, but other times it's, like, genuinely, like, it made me laugh, and it was cute. We go back to Ari's perspective as he's driving them around. He's thinking, from the moment that she'd arrived at the group home after her parents' deaths, tears were an ever-present companion. More often than not, I'd found her curled up in a corner sobbing over what she had lost. I'd had it much better than her as a kid. I couldn't remember the parents who kicked me to the curb, but she'd actually watched her parents disappear. And it didn't take a fortune teller to guess that her adoptive parents hadn't been good to her, that they'd maybe even been abusive. Made me even more fucking mad at her other because he had done a piss poor job of protecting her the last couple of years. If I hadn't lost her, I would have done everything to keep her safe. Anything. Blake had always been an intoxicating mix of fragility and strength, a masterpiece if there ever was one. Now I had her back, I would make it my life's mission to see her smile, to replace the haunted expression in her eyes with happiness. Which is ultimately a very cute sentiment. He then takes her to a bakery, saying that sugar fixes everything. Sugar will make you happy. She pushes back a little bit about like, well, not when you get paid based off of how you look. He's like, whatever, dude. One cupcake's not gonna kill ya. They order the cupcake, and then they go back to his house to eat cupcakes and watch movies. Like, just hang out and try and make her feel better. He asks her again if she's okay. It helps to talk about things with someone who cares. Seems to make it at least a little bit better. At least that's what my experience has been. Her lips pursed. She was trying to hold in tears. Why do you even care? She finally whispered. Why am I even here with you in this house? What am I doing? A tear finally slid down her face, and the effect was devastating. Tell me where it hurts, baby. Blech. She continued to hold my gaze for a long, long minute, and then she took a deep breath. I'm so fucking tired of being the villain in my own story, Ari, and I have no idea how to stop. Aren't you sorry you asked? Not at all, sunshine. Just reinforces the fact that you need me. A bestie in your corner to tell you that you're the motherfucking most perfect creature I've ever come across in my life. We'll fix all those problems together, I promise. But for right now, you're gonna let me feed you the rest of this scrumptious cupcake, and you're gonna believe me when I tell you that your body literally makes me feel like I'll die because you won't let me touch it. And then we'll watch whatever terrible rom-com you just picked, even though Harry Potter would obviously be the superior choice, and I'll feed you tacos or whatever else you want, and you're going to forget about everything else for the rest of the day. I'm still thinking I can't find anything wrong with you, Ari Lancaster. Then stop looking. Ignoring the shock on her face, I pulled her into my arms, and we did every last thing that I'd suggested. The rest of the day would go down in my history as one of the most perfect days I'd ever experienced, and I decided right then and there I was done waiting. So, sentiment, cute. Words he's saying, cute. He's kind of love bombing, very heavily love bombing, which is just very over the top expressions of love to like get somebody to fall for you faster, which is understandable from his perspective, right? He is expressing feelings that he has had for a girl that he has had a crush on for however many years. I don't know how old they are. We still don't know. It still has never been said. So since he was 12 years old though, right? Got it. She has no idea who he is though. So what are we doing? This is the insta love that I hate so freaking much. Even though technically it shouldn't be, it still feels that way and seems that way, that it's ugh. Chapter 9, Blake realizes a few days later that she still doesn't have Ari's number, but she's been watching his games, and she's been upset that Soto has continued to invite Charlotte to the games and like attending them and going to these parties and everything else, but Ari has never asked her to go. She has been texting her boyfriend Clark though, and Clark is coming into town for Halloween. He's flying in for the party tonight, and I was considering it as a chance for a new beginning, a fresh start, I thought, as I examined the Catwoman suit that clung to my figure. And then he's gonna dress up like Batman. You haven't talked to him. They have had very minimal conversations. Yes, no's, emojis, not acknowledging the whole arrest thing, and then he's just miraculously gonna fly across the country for a party? And you're not suspicious about that, or like questioning that in any way? She's having super like contradicting feelings about her loyalty to Clark versus her burning attraction for Ari. And that night at the party, it's a whole spectacle. You know, she gets into a limo with a bunch of other models. They arrive to a barrage of paparazzi. And this is the party that all the celebrities, like all the who's who, are at, right? She gets a text from Clark to meet her on the to meet him on the third floor. Again, she's Catwoman, he's Batman. A few steps into the next room and I saw him, Clark, leaning against the wall in his Batman costume. He was striking, his tall, muscular frame accentuated by this snug-fitting costume. The dark fabric clung to his chiseled physique, emphasizing every sinew and curve beneath. He looked good. Better than good. Maybe I'd been wrong about him not pulling off Batman, because I was having a wild reaction just staring at him. My breasts felt heavy under his dark green gaze. My insides were softening. My thong was soaked. Oh my God. Had he always been this big, this powerfully built? His strong jawline was adorned with a hint of rugged stubble, adding a raw, primal edge to his handsome features. His green eyes smoldered beneath his mask, a lusty animal look in them that had me rubbing my thighs together, desperate for some relief. Jesus Christ. Batman grabs her hand, pulls her into another room, starts making out with her. They start doing some spicy stuff, and she moans Clark's name. You know who I fucking am. And don't you say his fucking name again, or I'm gonna choke you with my motherfucking cock. Ari Lancaster growled. I stood there, the realization of what was happening sinking in like a heavy stone in my chest. Okay. He goes on to do that. And then they have like a full-blown spice scene. No protection, by the way, is used. No mention of protection. No discussion of like when they were last tested or been to the doctor. Like literally nothing is talked about. Just like full on, full steam ahead, engaging in that. Which, just in the last book, it was noted how much that like Ari messed around with like puck bunnies, and he was like the party guy that did a bunch of stuff with a bunch of people, right? Like he's kind of like known for that. Hey man, like no shame at all, right? Like do you, but feels like a pretty critical conversation to have, right? Did not like that whatsoever. Oh Jesus fucking Christ. We also learn at this point that so in the last book one of the ways that Lincoln proved his love for Monroe is he tattooed Monroe's name on his junk. In this book, Ari's junk was completely pierced from root to tip, a Jacob's ladder extending from the bottom of his gigantic all the way to the top. I would have known it wasn't Clark the second he whipped that thing out, obviously, because Clark's would not compare in any way. Which is, hey, fucked up thing to say, for one. And for two, if you don't know what that term is, like a Jacob's ladder, just look that shit up on incognito mode. That is not a work safe thing. Actually, probably don't look it up. I'm sure you can imagine. It's fucking freaky looking. No offense. Full offense? I don't know. I don't know what C.R. Jane's thing with modified members is, though. I really want to read the third book just to see if there's something crazy with, like, walkers. Like, what else could you possibly do? I don't want to know, actually. They do it. The afterglow stretched on, and then it was gone. I was standing in a closet inside of me, and my boyfriend was nowhere to be found. Words from the past shot through my head. How could you do this to me, to us? My father had cried. My mother was a cheater too, the reason that our perfect family fell apart, and here I was, just like her. So she starts to freak out about this. Ari clocks it. He says, no. You're not going to regret this. You're not going to regret us. I have a boyfriend. I'm a cheater, a whore. Don't you fucking fucking dare call yourself that? What if I told you that you were always supposed to be with me? What if I told you that we were always meant to be together? What if I told you he was in the wrong for taking you from me? And then I would try not to call you a liar. What the fuck? What happens now? I asked, dread, shame, euphoria, anticipation floating through me as I pulled up my costume and he tucked his somehow still hard into his pants. What happens now is that you break up with your boyfriend and you give us a chance because I'll make sure you never regret it. Uncertainty churned within me like a stormy sea, its waves crashing against the shores of my heart, threatening to pull me under its tumultuous depths. Could I summon the courage to take this leap of faith? You already moved from New York to LA and like cut off your entire like rich family and boyfriend and stability that you had across the country. I'm pretty sure you already took a leap of faith. Good God, you might as well hook up with the fucking millionaire while you're at it. What are you talking about? Then they leave the party together and she has to beg him to drive her home so that she can call Clark and end things with him properly before anything else happens because she feels like super, super guilty about what's going on. Clark doesn't answer when she calls him, and so then she texts him saying, "I'm sorry, but we're done." Going on to feel guilty about all of these thoughts, but ultimately thinking, life had a way of changing, of twisting our paths into unexpected directions. What we'd had was never going to be enough to sustain us, to sustain me. We deserved happy, even if it hurt like hell to get there. Okay. Chapter 10, Ari's at home and he's just thinking about how bad he needs Blake. She'd at least send that text to him though and try to call him. I mean, he'd never gotten it, but I'd take care of that. I never wanted her to talk to him again, no matter what he'd meant to her. I wanted to mean everything to her. He was never supposed to have been around in the first place. I'm going crazy and I needed to fix my name in her phone before I called her. Wait, what? Ew. So he's thinking all of this as he's like taking a shower and like about to like, yoink it. And he's saying it was Lincoln and Tequila's fault that I had this piercing to begin with. We'd signed our rookie contracts and got absolutely shit-faced. Before I knew it, I was getting my pierced and we were getting matching butterfly tattoos. Somehow I think he got the better end of things. At least the butterfly tattoos had a meaning. What? And so then he goes into this like whole fantasy thing, whatever. An hour later, he goes to weightlift with the team, and it's just a bunch of more crap talking with Soto. He makes a couple more jokes with Walker and talking about how he's almost cool enough to have a bromance with him and Lincoln. Like, he's almost into the circle of trust. It honestly really doesn't add anything to the plot. In chapter 11, Blake is at her apartment when Charlotte comes in. "Blake, you wouldn't believe what I found," she slurred, thrusting her phone in my face. I squinted at the screen, trying to make sense of the images that she was showing me. At first glance, it appeared to be Ari. My Ari, with a beautiful brunette. Panic washed over me and I could feel my heart racing. I examined the photo closer, trying not to spiral. "Charlotte, wait. Look at his hair. It's shorter, right? These pictures aren't recent, are they?" "They're not." It's kind of weird. Charlotte realizes that and then just kind of goes to her room. It's kind of a weird thing for your roommate to do. That does kind of cause more spiraling. And she starts thinking about how much, like, all of the socialite people that she knew in New York, like, they all had mistresses and would always, like, cheat on each other and whatever, despite their marriages. An NHL superstar would have even more options than those men. Was Ari like that? Would I be enough for him? It felt like I'd never been enough for anyone, and now the chase was done and he'd caught his prize. Would he lose interest? Then she starts Googling him. Finds an article that featured a bunch of photos of Ari at various events and gatherings. One of them, Ari Lancaster's annual gala raises record-breaking funds for Lost Children organization. In a dazzling evening that left attendees spellbound, Ari Lancaster, the celebrated star defenseman of the Dallas Knights, hosted his renowned annual gala to benefit the Lost Children organization. The event, now in its fourth year, proved to be an extravagant affair that captivated Dallas's elite while breaking previous fundraising records for the charity. The Lost Children organization, dedicated to assisting and rehabilitating homeless and at-risk youth, has long been close to Lancaster's heart. Every year he leverages his superstar power to gather support and resources for this noble cause. The gala, held at the opulent Grand Dallas Ballroom, saw an impressive turnout of Dallas's most influential figures, philanthropists, and celebrities. Rehabilitating homeless and at-risk youth. Why was that close to Ari's heart? I mean, it was a good cause for anyone to have, but there are a lot of good causes out there. I would know. I'd attended charities for about 1 million of them. A thought flicked in my head, but it still seemed so crazy. There was no way. The world was too big. Okay, rocks. I hate, dude, she's so fucking dumb. What do you mean? How common is the name Ari? I know, what is it, Ari Aster? Ari, the one comedian guy? I think those are the only two Aris that I've never come across that name ever anywhere else in my entire life. And also, why wouldn't you just ask? Maybe she doesn't want to reveal that she was, like, in an orphanage or something. But she could ask where he grew up. Like, she could narrow down, like, the region, like, where he's from. You would have thought that they would have had that conversation by now. She's at work later, and then Ari shows up at her work to get her number. They end up, like, making out in the middle of the restaurant. It's, like, really weird. And he takes her phone out of her hands to put his number in it, because obviously he has to, like, delete some stuff and move some stuff and, like, put his contact info in there. So I thought maybe that's how she would find out about him, was, like, later on when she would go to text him, that it would pull up the old text thread and it would be like, oh my god. It doesn't happen, though. Who cares? Don't ask about logistics. Don't think too hard about it. God, guys, just enjoy the vibes. So Ari leaves the restaurant because he doesn't want to get her in any trouble, but he can't go very far because he's just a stalker. So he ends up in the cafe across the street and just finds a little corner seat and watches her. Oh God. I looked over the menu, ready for a caffeine fix. Oh, good. They had pumpkin cream chai tea lattes. My favorite. I was a basic bitch when it came to fall drinks. Hey there, handsome. What can I get you? The waitress purred, or the barista purred. The curse of being so damn good looking, everyone wanted a piece of Ari Lancaster. Next time we talked, I needed to remind Lincoln that I was better looking, just so he didn't get a big head. A pumpkin cream chai tea latte with almond milk, please. Really? She asked, looking behind me like I was ordering for someone else. Yes, I know I have good taste. Anyone who orders a black coffee during pumpkin season obviously doesn't like fun. Ew. Then he's just sitting by the window, just staring at Blake while she goes through her shift. While he's there, though, he watches a kid pickpocket a guy, and it reminds him of his youth. When I was 8, I'd run away. I figured I'd have a better chance of surviving out on the streets than in that place, the first orphanage that he had gone to. I was a child, lost and alone, navigating a world that had given me nothing. After a few days, it was clear I did not have what it took to survive on the streets. I thought I would die out there, crouched in a grimy alley, and I was ready for it. Then Logan showed up. Nothing about him said good intentions, but he had become the savior that I desperately needed. He took me under his wing, took me to a rundown house where other lost boys like me sought sanctuary. Logan assumed the role of our mentor and protector, teaching us the art of survival, and in Logan's world, survival meant pickpocketing. Interesting backstory. There's a little bit more information, but nothing else really too critical. We go into chapter 12, and Blake gets off of work a little bit early, so Ari comes to pick her up, and she's thinking, my heart seemed to have already memorized the cadence of his laughter, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the warmth of his touch. We were two souls inexplicably drawn together, like magnets pulled by a force greater than ourselves. It was as if my soul recognized him, and as if we'd met before in another life, in another time. I couldn't explain it, but there was an unshakable feeling that our destinies were intertwined, that our connection went far beyond now. Girl, shut the fuck up. What are you talking about? You literally just met the guy. They're driving over. My heart was dancing in my chest, not exactly nervous anticipation, more like happiness. Was this what that felt like? I couldn't remember feeling it before. I stole glances at Ari, his gorgeous features bathed in the soft ambient glow of the car's interior. Ari Lancaster thinks he's lucky to have me, and until he figured out otherwise, I was going to enjoy the moment, because no one else in my life had ever made me feel like more than a favor. After Clark had saved me, I'd seen it sometimes. Like he felt he was the good guy for sticking around or hanging on despite all my issues. And honestly, that look in itself made me want to die, because he hadn't even known half of the issues I really had. The demons always floating around my mind. Don't go anywhere in that pretty head, Ari murmured, showing that he knew me better than anyone else had somehow. It's just me and you now, sunshine, and this thing between us is so big, there's never going to be room for anyone else. I felt like I'd been talking in a secret language for my whole life that no one else could understand except Ari Lancaster. It felt like maybe I could give him my sadness someday, and he wouldn't want to run away. He would just understand. The fact that my parents had irreparably broken something in me all those years ago wouldn't scare him away. Like, that's all cute. It's just, we're hamming it up a lot, bro. We are just... It's a lot. That's a lot of things. Very, like, in extreme, deep feelings and emotions to be expressing about a guy who literally got his phone number that day. This is like literally the 4th time you've ever talked. Maybe cumulatively have hung out for like 4 hours total. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about? They get to his house, they're gonna hook up. She's like, hey, can I take a shower first? Like, I smell like food and it's really gross. He says, yeah, that's fine. Here's the super fancy bathroom. Oh, by the way, there's a drawer for you in that vanity. She pulls it open and it's a bunch of like very nice makeup and skincare. And she's like, is this for all of your house guests? Like all the women that come over? Because that's like really fucking gross and I don't want to like that. Ew. He says, no, it's just for you. Like it's literally just for you. No one else has been over at this house. He has a housekeeper that he took with him from Dallas and moved her out to California with him. She's this like older lady. She's worked for him for a very long time. And he's like, no, like she bought that stuff for you, whatever. It's not like that. You're the only girl. Ari smacked a kiss on my lips. I'll give you some space for now, but just know that next time I'm joining you, he said huskily before literally left a room at a run, muttering something about needing to leave now while he could. There was also something in there about tacos, but that one just left me confused. She's taken a shower, she took her sweet time, and then by the time that she's done, she goes out to the kitchen, like living room area, and Ari is out there clearly showered as well, and shirtless, making tacos. She goes to eat it, and then he pulls her onto his lap, and then they like eat dinner with her sitting on his lap, and he's like, my house, my rules. Okay. I was quite confident of Ari's 3 favorite things at this point. Hockey, Lincoln, and tacos. 4 things, I amended. I was beginning to suspect that I was one of his favorite things as well. Yet another POV shift to Ari. It's just a very, very long thing of them hooking up, but it's actually romantic and sweet this time. I was suddenly overcome with gratitude. It was enough to make me fall forward and just lay my head on her stomach. I'd actually found her. All those years of feeling lonely, like I'd lost the one person meant for me, and I'd found her. Oh, they're in the middle of stuff. He says, my eyes widened because golly gee willikers, I'd died and gone to heaven. Blake had a dirty mouth. And it's stuff like that where I'm just like, what are we talking about? Why? I know the whole point is that he's like a little quirky, crazy guy, but it's just in the middle of a spice scene to read golly gee willikers is just unexpected. Afterward, he's getting like really obsessive, borderline scary thoughts about how it is ignited a dark, all-consuming obsession within me. It was a hunger, a need to possess her completely, body and soul. I wanted to envelop her in darkness, where there was no escape from my grasp, where she'd be forever bound to me. She wasn't just everything, she was the only thing, and I descend to the depths of madness to ensure that she stayed mine. Which, to be frank, is incredibly horrifying that we go from these, like, golden retriever moments to shit like that. I'm like, yo, that belonged in like Lincoln Daniels' book, right? Like that belonged in the last book. Like, can we keep this one happy and upbeat? I get it, we want like a dark, edgy romance, but I'm just like, instead, I feel like it's literally 2 characters that just got mushed together and not very well, if that makes sense. It feels so jarring that he goes from like one thought to another that I'm like, either this was written as a literal psychotic person, which, hey, he is. If you're stalking somebody and doing this like stuff, you're pretty fucking crazy. But I don't know. I don't think it was intentionally done. You know what I'm saying? It's executed in a way that I think it's almost just like poor writing and like just merging like 2 concepts of a person into one. Another POV switch. And Blake, they wake up the next morning and they're having some pillow talk, and she ends up asking Ari how he got into hockey. He's like, oh, I didn't get into it until I was 13 years old. And she's kind of surprised by that. She's like, oh, I figured like you would have been doing it since you were like not in the womb. Oh, that'd be painful. But since you were like in diapers. I didn't get into it until right before my 13th birthday. I was kind of an angry kid and I'd skip school to hang out at the mall. There was an ice skating rink inside and I stole a pair of skates and would sneak in every day and just skate for hours. And then around Christmas time, one of the Catholic parishes in the area had put up an ice rink with like a hockey goal. He would just be out there for hours upon hours, and one of the priests eventually asked him if he had ever played hockey. He lied and said he did, and then the priest helped set him up to get him to go to like the preparatory school and do hockey stuff there, and that's where he met Lincoln, and then they've been BFFs since then, and it like changed his life. Your parents must be so proud, I murmured, trying to imagine myself that good at anything. What would my parents have thought? I realized suddenly that Ari hadn't said anything. I looked up at him, and he was staring at the sunrise, his brow furrowed, the usual twinkle in his eyes dulled and stressed. His grip on my hip held a touch of desperation. I didn't have parents, sunshine, he finally murmured, turning to watch me in his full verdant green gaze. I was dropped off at a group home when I was a toddler. I gaped at him, mind racing, but no, things like that didn't happen, not in real life. A group home? Yes, he said gently, his eyes urging me on. Then she has a flashback of one of the nights that she and Ari were watching the stars. They would often do that. They would just lay outside and stargaze. Ari, I spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, Do you think I'm gonna be sad forever? He was silent a moment as if contemplating the vastness of the universe above us. I watched the stars twinkle in his eyes, and in that moment I realized he carried his own burdens, his own share of sorrows, yet he had always been my refuge, the one who understood me without needing words. I'll make you happy, he finally said, his voice tender and resolute. It might take a while, but someday I'll make you happy for the rest of your life. I felt a glimmer of the happiness that he had vowed to bring into my life, and though forever seemed like a really long time, I believed him. I'd left with the Shupfields the very next week. The revelation hit me with a sudden, you fucking rocks. Sorry. I'm so mad that it took her 46% of the way through this book, page 173, for her to say anything or ask or acknowledge, like, how? She didn't know his last name at the boarding school either? He knew hers. I actually just realized that. She didn't know his last name at the boarding school? Ugh. Anyway, the revelation hit me like a sudden burst of sunlight through stormy clouds. Staring at the grown man who'd once been a boy I didn't think I could live without, I couldn't contain the overwhelming rush of emotions that surged through me. Tears welled in my eyes, happiness and shock exploding through my veins as the realization of who he was washed over me. I sobbed into his chest, completely overcome. Ari? I finally whispered, staring up at him through tear-strung eyes. There was a newfound significance behind his name. I made a promise after all, Layla. The universe just finally decided to help me with it. My eyes closed as he said my name, my real name, the one I never allowed myself to think about anymore. Then she clings to him and they cry together, and it's cute, I guess. In chapter 13, Ari's at hockey practice and he gets a text from his PI that Blake had booked a gig for the next day to do an underwear shoot with, like, Hollywood's A-list heartthrob hottie dude. And obviously, Ari can't let this happen. God forbid she do her job. God forbid she do a really big life career-changing job. So he calls his agent manager thing and gets him to make some calls so that he can replace the guy in said photo shoot. The prospect of Derek Thornton, the A-list celebrity guy, hovering around Blake, like, was driving me insane. If this didn't work, I was gonna have to puncture her tires, break her phone so she couldn't call an Uber, puncture my tires so she couldn't borrow my car, kidnap her and take her to some deserted island. I was sure I could find one in a pinch if I really needed to. Daddy Lincoln would, oh my fucking God. Daddy Lincoln would let me use his new private jet. Finally, my agent texted me, "You're in. Get ready for some media attention." There's more information he sent in a link, but I didn't click on it. I was currently on the floor breathing in relief. I hadn't quite been prepared for a kidnapping. In Blake's POV, she's going to the photo shoot. She's having a self-hatred, self-image, body issue spiral yet again. Involved some eating disorder stuff this time. But she shows up to the shoot and she is feeling horrible. Like, absolutely horrendous and out of it, and it's not good. But she runs into Ari, finds out that he replaced the guy. Doesn't really question it, though. Like, just doesn't come up. Just, like, isn't suspicious of that whatsoever. She's surprised that he's there, but she's happy. You know, he senses that something's wrong. He gives her a bunch of encouragement and positive words, and they go through the shoot together, and she's still kind of out of it. So he calls a pause in the middle of the shoot. He's like, "Take 15, guys." They go to a dressing room and bang away the sadness. Is anybody surprised? And then they end up having a great photo shoot with a bunch of, like, sexual tension, obviously. It's phenomenal, though. The photos turned out great, and the photographer person's, like, so impressed. Like, the lady in charge of the campaign is just, like, blown away by how great it turned out to be. In chapter 14, Ari is at a hockey game out of state and away from Blake, and he's losing his mind because she was supposed to go. Like, he was going to have her fly out on Lincoln's private jet and go out to wherever they are, but there's, like, a really bad storm that happened in LA, so she's just kind of, like, stranded out there. Not stranded, she's at her apartment, but he's sure acting like it's, like, the end of the world. And he's like, well, what if Clark shows up, and what if, like, blah, 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 like, oh my God, everything sucks. And then he and Walker have more talk before the game, and they end up doing a whole other Shake It Off thing, this time to Bejeweled by Taylor Swift. What do you want from me, dude? I don't get it. Truly, I don't get it. I know that they're building the whole relationship thing between them for the next book, whatever, but I'm just like, I don't know if, like, maybe CR just really loves Taylor Swift. Maybe she's just trying to be relevant for the Eras tour. Maybe, I don't know who she's trying to sell this book to, but it was just excessive. Anyway, when they're on the ice, Soto got up in my face, the veins in his forehead looking like they were staging a protest, bulging and pulsating theatrically. "One of these days, I'm going to fuck your little girlfriend's... show her how a real man's dick feels. I think I'll do it bare. Yeah, fill her with my Leave it there for you to find it. Jesus Christ. Soto says this to him in the middle of a game. Any sanity that I had left snapped. Before I even had a chance to think, I ripped off my gloves, tore off his helmet, and then my right fist shot forward like a rocket, connecting with Soto's jaw with a satisfying crack. His head snapped to the side, and for a split second, there was stunned silence on the ice as everyone processed what just happened. They go on to fight, and he kicks Soto's ass, and they won their game. As I celebrated on the ice, I couldn't help but cast a glance in Soto's direction. He was staring at me, absolutely seething with anger, gritted teeth and all. I blew him a kiss just to drive it in deep. In chapter 15, another 2 days go by, and now there's a home game, and Ari is just happy to be back with Blake. They're hooking up before the game. There's like so much spice. It's like every single chapter. The game starts and there's a group of frat guys that are sitting behind Blake trying to talk to her. Ari sees this and has a staff member interfere and gets them kicked out of the game. I returned my focus back to the game. I continued to steal glances at Blake, though, making sure no one else was trying to swoop in. She was mine and no one else's, and I intended to make that abundantly clear both on and off the ice. Okay? And you're thinking to yourself, okay, that's sweet. Like, he got the bad people, kicked out. Like, he's paying attention. He's a very attentive boyfriend. That's cool. Just a few minutes later, we're in Blake's POV, a Cobra's employee dressed in team gear took the place of the frat guys. She held up a massive sign large enough to rival a billboard, and my eyes widened in disbelief as I read the words written on it. Property of Ari Lancaster, the sign declared boldly, an arrow pointing downward directly at me. I blinked, stunned into silence for a moment before a surprise burst of laughter bubbled up from my chest. People around us were staring as I shrunk into my seat, my face on fire with embarrassment, but also pride, because I wanted to belong to Ari. I was well aware I was the luckiest girl in the world to have him like I did. More and more members come over with signs. This continued through the game. A Cobra's employee would come out with a sign that they'd flash above my head, and the Jumbotron would flash a shot of me. The signs included such gems as Ari's better half, Blake's got Ari fever, no trespassing, Ari's territory, Ari's soulmate, hands off, reserved for Ari's queen, property of number 24, Ari Lancaster, Blake's the goal, Ari's the assist, Ari's MVP, warning, she's taken. Ari was obviously determined to keep the spotlight on me, and the crowd seemed to love every moment of it. It was endearing and absurd, and that warm feeling in my chest, it was growing. The final buzzer sounded, the crowd erupted celebrating, and Ari had one more sign for me. Ari's lucky charm. Sure, that's cute. Sure, whatever. After the game, they're on the way home, and Blake, she's like feeling good after this game. She's like, wow, like he's really expressing this like love for me, and everything's feeling great. Actually, it might be feeling too good. Starts to question it, and so she says, Ari, do you ever worry about what happened with Clark, that I'll cheat on you because I cheated on him? He says, not even for a second, and besides, I'd never let you. I'd never let any man get in the picture. My mother cheated on my father. That's why he went crazy that night. I found it out after I'd been adopted. I found all the articles online. Sunshine, that's not you. But isn't it? Because I remember. Dad did all the things that you were supposed to. I used to walk in on them dancing in the kitchen, thinking to myself I couldn't wait to have a love like that. He brought her flowers every week, treated her like a queen, and she still stabbed him in the back. Isn't that like what I did to Clark hurt a good man? I didn't know why this was coming out now. Maybe it was because I hadn't been able to apologize to Clark. Maybe it was because every day Ari seemed too good to be true, a dream I could never live without. He goes on to like say all the right things, you know what I mean? And be like, oh, like you're fine, it's not like that, I love you so much, like I trust you. It's the next morning and their spice is interrupted by Ari's phone that just keeps going off. Evidently, news of my antics at the game the other day had spread, and Clark was finally aware that he'd been dumped. Jesus Christ, what a horrible way to find that out, by the way. Your girl just goes radio silent, you get arrested trying to win her back, still radio silence once you get back home, and then you just see her on national television. Dude, I feel so bad for Clark. Clark was well aware that he'd finally been dumped. The PI said that he'd booked a flight and was on his way to the airport now to try and get her back. Seriously, this guy was a loser. It had literally been weeks since they'd had a real conversation, and besides that one time, he'd been a total bump on a log. Honestly, I'd expected him to put in more of a fight, but he was making it too easy. So he goes on to call Lincoln and ask for advice, saying that, the other is on the way to LA. Lincoln's response is, I've got a guy who can make Clark's flight plans go haywire. putting him on the no-fly list for at least a little while. He hangs up with Lincoln and he thinks to himself, we said goodbye so he could get Clark grounded, and I sat back in my seat in satisfaction that at least this little nuisance would be delayed. I was also thinking it was way past time for Blake to move in. With her having her own place, I couldn't control who she saw. If she was at my place in a gated community, Clark wasn't going to get to see her. So he comes up with a great idea. Again, if you read the first book, this is a very similar thing where Lincoln, what did he do? I don't know if he threatened Monroe's landlord or like paid the landlord off or something, but forced her to get moved out of her apartment that she had. In this book, Ari talks to some people, pretty much gets like a dossier on Charlotte, finds out that she has a drug problem and some debts and whatever, and that he can pay her off to be such a horrible roommate that Blake will feel she has no choice but to move out. The idea was that Charlotte would throw around some clothes, steal some stuff, throw a rager, in general, just make it look like a Category 5 tornado hit the place. Foolproof, or so I thought. When Blake gets home, Charlotte is having intercourse with Soto, another man, and a huge plastic thing, right? All of that is happening at the same time in Blake's bed. So she comes home, she hears this happening, sees this happening, screams, proceeds to pack up all of her crap. Charlotte and Soto are like, oh, you should join us, baby. She ignores them, continues to pack, and calls Ari and is like, hey, can you come pick me up like as soon as possible? He says, yeah, babe, I got you. They hang up. She continues to pack. She's in the bathroom getting her stuff together, and Soto corners her in the bathroom. There is some threats about stuff that he is about to do to her. Charlotte comes up behind him and she's like, yeah, that'd be so hot. Ew. Luckily, before anything bad actually starts to happen, Ari gets there. So he must have just been right around the corner, right? He busts down the front door. He comes into the bathroom. He sees what's going on. He grabs Soto, beats him black and blue, to the point like his teeth are flying out of his mouth. He's like unresponsive on the floor. She has to like pull Ari off of the man before he like legitimately like kills him. Hey, if you know me, if you watched anything on this channel, I love revenge. If you put your hands on somebody non-consensually, you deserve to get beat up, right? Hey, violence is not the answer, but sometimes it sure is justice. You know what I'm saying? Charlotte is like screaming over Soto's like passed out body. The other guy already like booked it and ran away. And then he grabs the last of Blake's things, throws it in Ari's car, and they go back to his house. She's thinking to herself. Later, when I'd finally pulled into his driveway, I'd completely forgotten about how fast Ari had gotten to my place after my call. All I could think about was the fact that maybe Ari was my new home. Same thing. So she thinks about it for all of a split second. Thanks, C.R. Jane. At least you're acknowledging the nonsensical shit in here. But also, that's the extent of her thought on that? No further questions asked. Okay. In chapter 17, Ari is thinking about the fact that they have their first game in Dallas in a few days, and he's like half excited, right, to see his team and see everybody, but he's also very nervous because he doesn't know how the crowd will react to him, maybe? He doesn't know if it's going to be a good homecoming or if they're going to, like, boo him off the ice, pretty much. Lucky for him, the guy who replaced him is having a, like, shit season, so it should be easy for him to get back onto the team next season, which is the plan. We cut to Blake's POV a couple days later, and she's boarding Lincoln's private jet to be flown from LA to Dallas. As I stared around, I noticed something peculiar. Everyone working the flight looked like they were someone's grandmother. Everyone, even the two pilots. A petite woman with a crown of silver hair, cheerful demeanor, and a cat sweater approached my seat. Her name tag read Edna. So she's like, why are all of these old women here? She texts Ari asking. She says, so you don't have to answer this, but does Lincoln have some kind of fetish for older women? Ari responds, I'm dead. I will never let Lincoln live this down. She's like, no, I'm serious. Like, what is happening? Does Monroe know about this? He says, I'm seriously dying. No, Mr. Golden Boy does not have a fetish for grandmas. He has a fetish for not letting anyone of interest speak to or look at or touch Monroe. So rather than waste a bunch of money on buying out all of the first class for her every time that she flies so no one can talk to her, he bought a plane and hired a bunch of grandmas to fly it so he didn't have to worry anymore. In chapter 18, the night before the Dallas game, Ari is hosting the gala for the Lost Children organization, and Blake is in a ball gown for the first time. It's kind of freaking her out a little bit, right? In fact, the very idea of attending one of these was sparking panic like I hadn't had in a while. Gala nights were obviously not unfamiliar to me. I had been forced to attend countless similar gatherings with the Shepfields. The memory of those gala nights filled with insincere smiles and hushed conversations had a lasting scar on my psyche. It was a stark reminder of my outsider status within that family and my years of feeling like mere decoration in their opulent world. Now, as tonight's events approached, all of those old anxieties had resurfaced. The prospect of navigating another glamorous event, even with Ari's unwavering support, made my skin feel tight. Would I once again be reduced to a mere spectacle, judged by the same shallow standards that had once been imposed on me before? Ari approaches her and he's like, "Sunshine, like, what's going on? It's fine. I understand why you're worried about it, but it's not like that. Like, I hope that tonight will be different for you. I wouldn't ask you to do this, but the Lost Children organization is my organization." My eyes widened in surprise because the articles I read hadn't mentioned that. Okay, I know I'm saying it a lot. Rocks. Come on, honey. Please. What do you mean? We opened the chapter with her saying Ari's organization. I read you the article verbatim earlier. It might not have said it outright that he owned the organization, but I'm pretty sure Ari Lancaster, apostrophe S, the ownership version, Lancaster's organization. What else would you interpret that to mean? What do you mean? How are you surprised by this? I genuinely, she is dumb as a box of rocks. I just can't. And then he follows on and he says, "If I can save one kid from what I went through, then I'll do it. And the best way that I found is throwing a huge party, getting people drunk, and then showing them sad pictures of kids so they empty their pocketbooks. I'm supporting group homes in 15 states right now. Most of what keeps them going comes from tonight. I'll understand if you don't come, but it would mean the world to me if you would." So she's like, "Oh yeah, of course. Now that you've explained it in that way, I'd love to come." So they're in the limo ride over. They end up hooking up. What do you want from me, dude? It's another spice scene. As they arrive at the event and they're all finished up, I glance down at his... We can't go out there with that monster in the building. Ari stared up at the ceiling and started his usual grandpa balls chant as I watched the driver approach our door. "Hurry!" I yelled, glancing down at his again. "Don't yell at Maximus 5000. He doesn't like to be pressured," Ari hissed back. I burst out laughing. Maximus 5000? It's a pet name. All the great ones have it. Oh my god. The driver opened the door, and not even the flashes of the cameras outside could make me stress. Not with Maximus 5000 poking me in the back as we walked the red carpet that led to the gala, Ari trying to hide his problem the entire time. I had to admit, it was the perfect distraction. So they go inside. It's beautiful. Lincoln and Monroe are there, and there's lots of banter between them. Walker also comes up and sits at the table with them. At the end of the night, Monroe tells Blake that Ari is definitely in love with her, and it's cute. Blake is glad to have a female friend who is so kind, and then they all end up at a taco shop. 19, it's game time. The crowd cheers for him. It's very heartwarming, but it's quickly ruined for me personally when the following happens. I noticed the sign held up by two girls in the front row. It read, "Lincoln, number 13, we sucked your in college." Lincoln's face was puzzled and faintly amused as he stared at the sign. But me? I was pissed off. I skated over to him. "I can't believe that sign." "Yeah, that's a new one," Lincoln said with a grin. "No, I can't believe it's your fucking name on the sign. That girl right there sucked my," I growled, pointing to the girl I definitely recognized, even if I had no clue what her name was. "She did not suck your..." Lincoln stared at me incredulously for a long moment before he burst into hysterical laughter. "What are you laughing about? This is serious. How is my dick that unmemorable?" "Yeah, so..." That's all I can... That's all I can say. What are you talking about? Why? Hey, so, like, why? I thought he was obsessed with his girl. I thought he and Lincoln were both just obsessed with their women. And if you're, like, wives, well, your wife and your girlfriend are at the game watching you, knowing that they're in the crowd and can probably see that sign, you're not gonna, like, tell them to take it down, that that's offensive, that that's, like, up to have. Like, I feel like the proper response would have been to get an arena member to make them throw the sign away. That just feels awfully dismissive of your relationship. Not cool. Like, that gave me the ick really bad, actually. It's just lots and lots of game talk. Ultimately, the Cobras win, and at the end of the night, they go to the club to celebrate, and there's more spice. In chapter 19, a few days after his return home, a bunch of gossip magazines have dug up stuff about Blake and are publishing it, talking about her parents passing away and the way, like the violent way that their lives ended, talking about her boyfriend and how maybe she did actually cheat on her boyfriend with Lincoln. Or that'd be wild, with Ari. The only thing to really note is that she's reading this and she's thinking, but how did they find out about my parents? The Shepfields paid tons of money to get rid of my past, right? Changed her name, any connections that they had there. So somebody spilled the beans on that, right? Ultimately, it had to have either been the Shepfields or Clark maybe getting back at her. But it's never said. It is literally that thought, that question, never acknowledged again. So who knows? It kind of is acknowledged in a way, though, because later that day, when she's at the restaurant, she looks up and it's Maura, her adoptive mom, is sitting in the middle of the restaurant in LA. What the hell is that woman doing here? Well, if it isn't my daughter, the failure. This is quite the fall from grace, isn't it? That wasn't a question. You know, Blake, we always hoped that you didn't have the same genes as your worthless parents. We discussed it for days before we adopted you, the chance that you might end up like this. Have you decided what you want to eat? I spit, trying to stop her vitriol, but she wasn't going to stop until she said all that she wanted. Look at you. You gave up a world of privilege for this, slaving away like a servant, your modeling career in ruins. Your order, please. I choked out because I did not want to cry in front of her. A steak, medium rare. Surely they can't mess that up. She hustles away. Before she actually puts that order into the kitchen, though, she starts to cry, so she, goes through the back, door of the restaurant and is in the alleyway. I wiped the tears away and walked back inside, feeling that old familiar sensation that I was a stranger in my own skin, that it was stretched too tight across my bones, and any second now it would rip open and show everyone around just how ugly I was inside. It wasn't just Mara. It was that article, too, out there for the whole world to see. How soon until Ari thought that way, too? How soon until I all of this up? Cheater, whore, maybe that's all I really was. I stared around the restaurant. I was a failure, wasn't I? Doing this because I wasn't good enough for my real job. She approaches Mara. Mara says, "What's most disappointing, though, Blake, is that you aren't just worthless like your parents, but you're a cheater too. Just like your mother. Cheating on Clark was the biggest mistake that you've ever made. No true daughter of mine would be so stupid." She starts to disassociate, have a little panicky stuff going on. The noise of the restaurant came back as a deafening roar in my ears, and I forced myself to stay on my feet. What the hell is going on here? Ari's voice cut through the noise. I turned towards the sound of it. It was like a lifeline. He tries to kick Mara out of the restaurant. She counters, "Do you even know how messed up she is?" Shut the fuck up. Oh, you have no idea, really, do you? You don't know about the medication or the panic attacks or her eating disorder. I froze, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed. Heat crept up my neck. Humiliation was streaking through me. It felt like I might melt into the floor. My secrets were out there, laid bare for Ari to see them. I couldn't even look at him. He was never going to think of me the same after this. He was perfect. He wouldn't be able to stand me. She'd just ruined my one chance of happiness. Tears welled up in my vision. He goes on to continue to threaten Mara, kick her out, grabs Blake to get into his car. She knows, she's effectively fired, right, after causing such a scene at this restaurant. So her job is officially over. She's kicked out of her house. It's literally Ari and a halfway failed modeling career is all that she has going for her at this point, which, again, if you happened to read the first book, you would understand that Monroe was put in a very, very similar situation at this point in the book, where Lincoln had gotten her kicked out of her apartment and had also blackmailed all of her bosses into firing her as well. So she ended up, Lincoln was the only thing that she had. She didn't have any other options. Similar thing happening in this book. Truly, this is just the same book happening again, just with it's the exact same formula of book, just very slightly tweaked for the people that are there, but it's pretty close. They end up back at their house. She is spiraling worse than ever when she goes into the bathroom to self-harm, right? To release these horrible feelings that are in her. It's a lot. So skip 30 seconds if you need to. As she's about to do that, Ari busts through the door, walked towards me, stopped a few inches away. Without taking his eyes off of me, he slowly slipped off his shirt, throwing it to the ground. "Hurt me, sunshine," he murmured, grabbing my hand that was still holding the razor blade and pulling it up to his chest. "Every time you feel pain, hurt me instead. Let me take it from you." Ew! So then he is holding her hand and then carves her name into his chest. Yeah, her name in his chest. Just hate that. She goes on to talk about, he's like, tell me where it hurts. And she's like, everything hurts. Like, I'm tired of Mara Shepfield being right about the fact I'm a pathetic excuse for a human. I'm tired of being the villain in my own story. I'm tired. When are you going to be tired of all of the baggage I carry around and want to leave because I'm the burden you never signed up for, Ari Lancaster? Never. The answer's never. Your pain is not a baggage to endure, baby. It's an honor for me to help you shoulder it. Give it to me. Tell me where it hurts. Let me take it away. And then she tells him about the time that she tried to unalive herself, and Clark is the one who found me. He took me to the hospital, and I still broke his heart. Knowing that, Ari Lancaster, why are you trying so hard to save me? Sunshine, what you haven't realized is that you're saving me right back. I gave up my soul all those years ago, and I've just been existing ever since, waiting for you to come back to me. You aren't some girl, and I'm not some boy. We're soulmates, twin halves, the same fucking soul. Continue on this like back and forth between the two of them. He like holds her until she like cries herself to sleep. 2 days later, when I woke up, Ari showed me a brand new tattoo of my name that he'd inked where he had cut his skin. I asked him why, and he just laughed. And somehow Ari Lancaster, he did the impossible. He took my pain. I swear to God. I swear to God. Every single one of these videos, I end up hyperventilating. This is the moment in this one. We were doing so good at expressing the feelings of self-image issues and like body image issues and like self-hatred and like, a bunch of very complicated negative feelings toward yourself, right? Represented very well through this book. Maybe to an excessive amount that it was a little bit frustrating to continue to read the same thing over and over again, but done in such a way that I respected it, right? I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're like having a genuine, like, grumpy sunshine character dynamic, and the woman's the grumpy one, and she's carrying a bunch of baggage, and that's cool, and like he's trying to like, help her. And then you're gonna do that shit to me? That just negated every single thing that we've experienced through this book so far. Every ounce of like validity and like, oh my God, feeling that I had just went away. Genuinely. Just died on the vine right there. What do you mean? He took her pain away just by doing that. That's crazy shit, bro. Chapter 21, Blake is at a photo shoot. Ari's frustrated that he can't stalk her more appropriately because he's at practice. And while Ari is at practice, Soto approaches him. Hey, Ari, I had an interesting conversation about you today. Oh, yeah? I answered, matching his casual tone. Who with? Just some rando. He was hanging out before practice, asking questions about you. Seemed like a real nice guy. What kind of things exactly was he asking? Soto raised an eyebrow. No, just wanting to know when you started dating your girlfriend, what your schedule was like. Nothing big. And you answered those kinds of questions? Asked Walker incredulously, looking less like a Disney prince and more like a Disney villain at that moment as he stared angrily at him. He starts freaking out, pulls out his phone, and the tracking app that he had on Blake's phone has been disabled. Cut to Blake's perspective. She's thinking, my life had taken on a dreamlike quality after that night that I'd bared all of my secrets. I actually felt like his love was physically healing me, and I loved him so much that it hurt. I still had so far to go. Obviously, a lifetime of trauma and bad coping mechanisms wasn't going to disappear overnight, but I could feel myself changing. It gave me hope that he'd been right, that someday maybe it wouldn't hurt so bad. Okay, so at least we're acknowledging out loud, right, that it didn't, like, go away overnight because of him. But that's still kind of what you're saying to me. You're putting a little, like, disclaimer sentence in there, like, that's not what's happening, but you're portraying it as if that is what's happening. She gets out of her photo shoot, and Clark is standing there. What are you doing here? I spit, my heart battering against my rib cage. His disheveled appearance was a stark contrast to the confident, successful man that I'd dated for so many years. And for the first time since I'd known him, I was a little afraid. Blake, I had to see you. Why now, Clark? I haven't heard from you, really, since I moved. I broke up with you. No, you didn't break up with me. We never talked. Clark looked at me with a pleading expression, his eyes searching mine for some sign of understanding. He reached out to grab my hand, and I pulled away. Blake, you have to listen to me. Nothing that has happened has been real. What are you talking about, Clark? You were talking to me, and then you weren't, and I met someone. I know you met someone, Blake. You met a psycho someone. Ari Lancaster is the reason that we aren't together. I nodded, confused. I mean, yes, he was the person that I'd met. No, sweetheart. Ari Lancaster has been stalking you. He saw you, made a plan, and methodically went through with it to push us apart, Blake. He's been behind the scenes pulling the strings this entire time just so he can control you. Clark, that's enough. If you want to have a talk, we can talk, but you don't have to make things up. He saw you on a billboard. He found out who you were, and he requested a trade and stalked you to California. He's the one who planted drugs in my car and got me on a no fly list. He made a spectacle of your relationship so that it would be all over the press. He emailed me pictures of the two of you from a burner account. He goes on to tell her that, like, he found out the PI that Ari was using and then paid the guy enough money so that he actually gave him the information about Ari. So that's how he knows all of this. That's how he was able to put all of this stuff together. Because the PI flip-flopped. The scandal! She says, do you have any proof of this, or are you just throwing things around and, like, hoping that they catch? I know it sounds insane, Blake, but he's the reason I couldn't talk to you. I sent you a million messages. I called you a million times. Tell me, did you ever get these? He pulled out his phone and he scrolled through message after message, begging and pleading with me to answer him and stop ignoring his calls. My head was spinning, trying to understand what happened. Can you take out your phone? With shaking hands, I pulled it out, typing in the password that Ari had asked me to add to it. Go to my contact. Clark pressed. Watching my hands navigate the contact list. Finding Clark's name, I tapped on it fully, expecting to find nothing. He was blocked, but I knew I hadn't done that. Maybe I accidentally... If you check Facebook, you'll see that I'm blocked on there too. Uh-oh. And it was. And then she's thinking about it more and she's like, even the drugs in his car, like, I know he doesn't do drugs. I'm like, you're just now thinking of that? What are you... Were you so distracted by Nick that, like, you just completely forgot a man that you had known for so many years? What? The problem was that everything that Clark had said could be true, but because I was so fucked up, I still wanted Ari Lancaster with everything in me. Oh my god. I can't believe this is happening. Clark knelt in front of me, his voice soft and reassuring. I understand, Blake. It's a lot to take in, but I promise you, I never stopped loving you. I never gave up on us. Now that I've gotten you back, we can start over. I'll move here, or you can move back home. We can fix this. And he's like, I'll do anything. Like, I'll try. And she's like, I know you would. I know you would, but we're done. We're not doing this anymore. He says, I will find a way to get you back, to prove that what we had is enough. I will never give up on us. Clark leaves, slamming the door behind him. I sat in the aching silence after he'd left for a long, long time. And then I went home, a compulsion I couldn't resist. It was dark in the house, so dark that I was sure that he wasn't home. And I jumped when the living room light clicked on, and there he was, sitting on the couch, relief in his gaze. Beautiful as always, and a liar. It's all true, isn't it? He stared at me warily, exhaustion marring his perfect features. I watched as the wariness faded into resolution. Yes, and I would do it all again. I'd do anything to keep you. Oh my god. She's like, I'm gonna sleep in the guest room. I woke up in bed with Ari, his whole body wrapped around me, his head buried in my neck. It wasn't surprising. If he was willing to move states to get to me, a little old door wasn't going to hold him back. I listened to his steady rhythmic breathing and wondered how I was going to say goodbye. Oh my god. That's all he can say. At this point in the book, that's literally all he could say, and it just keeps getting worse. Genuinely, the rest of this book just keeps getting worse. In chapter 22, from Ari's perspective, he's watching her sleep and thinking, she belonged to me. Whether she fully comprehended it or not, the truth may have fractured the delicate illusion of our love, but it hadn't extinguished the fire that burned between us. I would do whatever it took to make her understand that, including making things a bit more permanent. We go to Blake's perspective. It's the day that the underwear photo shoot thing, like, launches officially, and the company is hosting a party to celebrate. So she and Ari are going to this, like, super fancy party, and on the way over, you know, they're still not talking. It's been a couple days, it's passed, it's been very tense, it's been very silent between them, and, you know, but he's like, hey, I want you to have a good time tonight. Like, just relax, enjoy yourself, whatever. Like, don't let what's going on between us distract you from having fun tonight. And so then she did. So they go to this party, they're dancing, she's drinking, you know, loosening up a little bit, relieved that, you know, maybe this is her chance to actually unwind and enjoy herself. I danced next to Ari, hands combing through my hair, hips swaying, basking in the fact that the alcohol shoved away all of my turmoil over what Ari had done, how our relationship had started. Continues drinking, and the more that she drinks, the more mushy that she gets. At some point they're dancing and she says, I don't want us to break. I won't let us break. But you tricked me. You blocked him. I think we've discussed this before, baby. You didn't belong with him. He was the one stepping where he wasn't supposed to. He was the intruder. It was always going to be us. I hummed my agreement because I'd thought that when I met him too, that he was my everything. You know, I thought that I was going to marry you when we met. I slurred. Something was nagging in the back of my head that I shouldn't be saying this, but I pushed it away because Ari was my safe space. Even when I was mad, hurt, upset, he still somehow was my safe place. Continues, just taking shots, getting drunk, hammered, sloshed, even. We stumbled through the neon-lit streets, my heels clicking on a sidewalk that felt alive with the pulsating beat of the bright light city. Ari's arm was wrapped around me, not letting me fall because he was always protecting me. The rush of adrenaline and alcohol in my veins as we stumbled into a building that seemed to appear out of thin air. There were couples everywhere, a lot of white, so much white, which was weird because I was in white too. She wakes up the next morning with a hangover from hell, right? Not remembering anything from the night before. I was pretty sure I was in Ari's house, in his bed. How exactly had we ended up here, and why did my body feel like it had been put through a blender? With a groan that came from the depths of my tortured soul, I slowly sat up, panic creeping in as I realized I was completely naked. Please tell me I hadn't slept with him. That was the opposite of the message that I needed to send. I remembered wanting to forget and drinking and having fun. We'd been dancing and I'd been convinced I could drink away having to break up with him. But I couldn't remember anything after that. Not how we'd gotten home, not what we'd done, nothing. She goes into the bathroom, washing her hands, getting cleaned up, and she sees a diamond. So enormous that it could have lit up the Eiffel Tower on her finger. I screamed. I couldn't recall anything. I just hoped that this ring had somehow materialized out of thin air because any other option was not okay. She goes into the kitchen. Ari's making her breakfast. He's playing Paper Rings by Taylor Swift. It's like a jump scare. Paper Rings by Taylor Swift. He turns over and looks at her, and he does not look hungover whatsoever. He says, "There you are, sunshine. I was about to come wake you up for breakfast. Here you go." He chimed in a voice that was far too cheerful for the world's current state of existence. A tried and true Lincoln and Ari hangover cure. "Drink up, wifey." Wifey, ha ha. "What's so funny? Do you not like the ring?" he asked innocently. "You're right, I should have gotten bigger." "What the fuck are you talking about, Ari?" I shrieked, the sound hurting my own ears. He covered the plate of waffles in front of him with his hands. "Language, Blake. You'll hurt the waffles' feelings." "Ari, tell me what you're talking about right now." And this is one of those covering the waffles' ears to not hurt the waffles' feelings. You know what happened? I think C.R. Jane watched Deadpool and is like trying to channel like Ryan Reynolds energy. I would expect to see that exact thing happen in a Deadpool movie. It's not cute. This is like actually really horrific, horrible shit for him to be doing the crazy little funny guy stuff. No, Ari, I want to know why I have a ring on my finger and you're calling me wifey. "Because we got married last night in Vegas, obviously." "What did you just say?" "I've got the certificate locked in our safe, and oh, I have a video. You're gonna love it." Shows her a video, all this crazy stuff that they did, like at the actual wedding. They went on a helicopter ride, all sorts of stuff throughout the entire night, and it was obvious I was blitzed out of my mind. My eyeliner was smudged all over my eyes, my hair was wild and out of control, and I was swaying in place like I was going to pass out at any minute. How had anyone thought that a wedding was a good idea? Ari, on the other hand, he looked perfect. His eyes clear, his hair artfully tousled, no sway in his walk, like he was completely sober, staring at me like I was his world. No, I wasn't going to think about that. When Elvis asked, "Do you take this man to be your husband?" I literally slurred hell yeah and pumped my fist. "This isn't a joke? You really took me to Vegas while I was blackout drunk and married me?" He nodded his head, his grin fading as his lips settled into a determined line. "Yep. And you said yes, sunshine, so you're stuck with me." The rest of what he'd done had been enough for any sane relationship to have ended, but this? What was I supposed to do? My voice trembled as I demanded, "Why would you do this? I never get drunk, I never let go, but I felt safe enough with you to do that. And then you did this? You took me to Vegas and married me? You told me last night you didn't want us to break up. You told me you didn't want it to end, so I made sure that it didn't." "Ari, people don't do this. How did you expect me to react? This is fucking insane. First what happened with Clark, and now this? How could you?" Ari's eyes bored into mine, his conviction unwavering. "Because we're soulmates, Blake. You and I are meant to be together, and now you can't leave me." Oh my God. People get divorced all the time, Ari. You can't just trap me in a marriage because you think we're soulmates. "Not us. I'm never letting you go." So she leaves to go to the guest room, slams the door closed, and just has a breakdown. Clark's use of the word psycho flashed through my head as I wrestled with my emotions. The most overwhelming one was despair. I'd believed Ari was my hero, a person that I felt safe with, a person I could trust. The weight of Ari's words and the depth of my emotions threatened to drown me. I knew I needed to confront him to figure this all out, but for now, I needed a moment because my heart had just been broken. Chapter 23 opens and Ari is thinking 2 weeks, 14 long days. That's how long it had been since Blake and I had stumbled into that tiny Vegas chapel and ended up married to each other. Of course, it had mostly been Blake stumbling. I had been perfectly sober. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. But I wasn't going to miss out on a chance to tie that girl down. Blake had barely said 20 words to me in those 2 weeks I'd been counting, and most of them had been variations of get the fuck out. I mean, I could understand why she'd be a little upset. I had taken advantage of her drunken state, married her without her clear consent, and then sent pictures of our wedding to my agent, who then promptly shared them with every news outlet in the country so that everyone knew that we were married. But I had really good intentions. I was going to make Blake happy, forever, just like I'd promised. We needed to get past this little speed bump first. Or at least that's what Lincoln kept telling me. Oh my God. Bro, this is crazy. This is crazy. She just keeps ignoring him though. This chapter ends with him boarding a private jet to fly to New York. Doesn't tell Blake that he's going there though, right? He just ups and decides that he's just going to go run an errand in the middle of the day and fly to New York. The plane soared through the skies with every passing mile. I rehearsed the conversation that awaited me in the Shepfield's Manhattan lair. I'd seen a picture of it in a design magazine that Blake had showed me once. Very Glass Castle-ish looking. It was kind of amusing that it was about to crumble around them. So he goes in and threatens to blackmail her adoptive parents. Here's how this is going to go. You will sign these documents, effectively disowning any claim that you have to Blake as her adoptive parents. You will promise to never contact her again, and you will ensure that she is left in peace. Parents are like, what the fuck? But also, we don't really have a choice, because he had some pretty damning blackmail. So they sign the papers. They sign away all of this stuff. Eventually, I would leak all of the information about who the Shepfields really were and let Blake relish in the satisfaction of seeing the mighty fall, but for now, it would be fun for them to live in misery, just as Blake had her entire life with them. Chapter 24, we're back in Blake's perspective, and she's just going on about life as usual. Like I said, she had been fired from the restaurant, but she's just doing photo shoots and just feeling like shit. And her phone vibrates, and she's actually kind of sad to see that it's just Clark reaching back out to her again and not Ari. A few days later, I was staring at the television blankly, watching who knows what when Ari suddenly stormed in holding up my phone. What's this? Give that back. Clark's texted you 20 fucking times this week. Why haven't you told him to fuck off? So what if he's texting me? What are you going to do about it, Ari? Are you going to plant drugs in my car? You going to block his number without telling me? Replace it with your fucking own? Or track my phone so that you know when we talk? Oh, wait. Are you going to put him on a fucking no-fly list? Maybe. Ari yelled. I flinched and stepped back, agony slipping through me. It was the first time that he had ever raised his voice to me. Jesus Christ. So then she has a flashback of her father and mother's last words to each other before he unalived them. Okay? Hey, what the fuck? He tries to comfort her. He comes back at a more level tone, saying some more stuff, but she's still in her own brain about this whole thing, and she says, I love you, Ari, but you can't manipulate people you love. You can't trick them. It's wrong. I'll say I'm sorry 1,000,000 times, sunshine, Ari whispered in a broken voice. I flopped back onto the couch in utter defeat. The problem is you won't mean any of them. He didn't deny it. I stared at the ring buried in the bottom of my dresser drawer. Its beauty didn't fit in with the socks that it was hiding under. I told Ari that I'd thrown it away, that I wanted nothing to do with it, and then I felt like a complete bitch because I swore he almost cried. This ring was the most beautiful thing that I'd ever seen. Its only flaw was that it now belonged to me without my consent. I would have loved this ring if he had done it properly, if he'd gone down on one knee and proposed when I was coherent enough to accept. Now I felt like it was tainted, and I hated that. And then oh my God, she's still ignoring him and just kind of going about the motions in the house and not talking to him. Ends up talking herself into feeling guilty about him. The worst part of it was that his eyes seemed dead. No emotion, no mischief. All the awe that I had treasured like a precious gift was gone, and I had killed it. My father may have killed my mother, but I'd learned over the years that there were a lot of ways to destroy someone. I was watching it happen right in front of me. I didn't understand how the mere thought of living without him was like a 1,000-pound weight on my chest, yet the idea of continuing in this state of mistrust and despair could feel just as heavy. I laid in the darkness that night, once again wrapped in his arms, tears silently staining my pillow, and I felt paralyzed. The only thing that I knew for sure was I would love Ari Lancaster for the rest of my existence either way. Oh my fucking God. Sorry. Hey, I know I'm supposed to have reactions and commentary and stuff. It's kind of like my job. But like, I can't even have reactions to what is happening right now. This is so batshit insane. It's literally just insane. In chapter 25, from Blake's perspective, it has been 21 days that she has been like actively ignoring him, and it has just been like tense in the house. She says, I should break up with you because nothing about what's happening is normal or okay. Nothing. How am I supposed to trust you? I whispered, and he flinched like I'd shot him instead of spoken the truth. What I didn't say, at least not yet, was that I'd never be able to break it off. I needed time to get past this, but I already knew that I would never be able to say goodbye. Ew. She goes to sleep that night, and it's the first night that he doesn't come in and sleep next to her. And she feels terrible, and she wanders through the house to try and find him because she is kind of concerned where he went. When she goes she said, oh my God, actually, I just clocked this. I wandered through the house towards our room, unable to stop myself, and there he was, fully dressed, a suitcase on the bed. Our room? You moved in and maybe slept in that room for like a couple nights before the whole Clark thing happened? Our room? Girl. He is all packed up. He says that he's going back to Dallas. My agent's working on a trade with the Knights, a mid-season trade in exchange for some draft picks. I can't watch you be so miserable. I can't be the reason that all your light fades. I love you enough to let you go, to stop forcing you to be with me. He lifted a trembling, tattooed hand to his face and rubbed at his forehead. I've hired an attorney for you. You just call the office and set an appointment. He closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to find the strength to continue. She has the divorce papers ready for you to sign, Blake. All you have to do is put your signature on them. That was fucking it. He'd tricked me, manipulated me, lied to me. He'd fucking married me while I was blacked out drunk, and he was giving up. Oh, you psycho bitch. All those times that he said we were forever, that we could get through everything, that he never let me go, this is what he'd meant? The way I loved him was desperate and dark, and it felt poisonous at the moment, but I hadn't given up. I was trying to fix things in my fucked up head. I needed time. I needed the grace to be pissed off and sad at him for everything. But he was giving up? She runs outside after him. I'm sorry I broke my promise to make you happy, sunshine. I'll never be over you. You'll always be the love of my life. He continues walking away. Tears continue to flow freely down my cheeks as I sobbed uncontrollably, the pain in my chest unbearable. It felt as if my entire world had crumbled into pieces, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. Girl, it has been like a month. I just want to go back on that. She has maybe known this man for like a collective, 2 months, 3 months maybe. That's a lot of emotion, even with the historic stuff, the historic past stuff. That is an awful lot of drama. She's at a photo shoot. It's not going well. She's mentally just not there. Understandably so, right? Not a good time at all for her. But while she's there, she feels her phone vibrate, and she again is very excited that maybe it's Ari, but it's not. It's Clark saying, thinking of you. Has Mr. Hockey Stick done anything psycho lately? I'm always here for you. I want to help. That makes me so sad, actually. Genuinely makes me so sad. So then she's driving around. Oh yeah, by the way, he bought her some expensive car at some point during this relationship. So she's driving around, reflecting on life, reflecting about all these feelings that she's having and how it has kind of gone sideways. And I froze then. Realization sliding through me. That's what I always was doing. I was always pushing down the pain. I'd always just told myself I couldn't handle it, but I was here, wasn't I? I mean, my father had killed my mother and then himself, and then I was still here. I'd grown up in a group home and then had been adopted by abusive, cold assholes, and I was still here. I'd self-harmed and had an eating disorder, and I wanted to not be alive, but I was still here. I'd saved myself from a miserable life in New York. I'd done that. I'd come here and started a career. I'd been supporting myself. I'd let love in even when I was scared. She keeps thinking cheater, ugly, fat, whore, stuff like that. Words that used to plague her throughout the entirety of this book that would just she would randomly have intrusive thoughts and think all that stuff about herself. But this time, she takes control of the situation and she gets lipstick, and this is so fucking cheesy. Writes all those words on the mirror in this red lipstick, and then she washes it off. And then she's fixed. That was her epiphany. That was her moment. She washed it away, and she's a new woman now. I'm perfect, I whispered, trying out the words on my tongue. I'd said them with Arya before, but never by myself, never like this. I'm perfect, I'm perfect, I'm perfect, I screamed, and I heard his voice in my head, cheering me on, because the only thing he'd ever wanted for me was to be happy. She threw a bunch of self-harming stuff away, She threw like her scale, like her, like, you know what I mean, to like check her weight. Throws that outside, it like shatters into a million pieces. Modeling agency actually had a mental health program. You could get free sessions of counseling. I didn't know if their therapists were good, but contacting them was a start. I'd filled out the form online and set up an appointment for 2 days from now. She gets dressed and then she ate. Like, she made eggs and pancakes and bacon and is like actually enjoying syrup and bacon for the first time. And it was something I never did. And it felt incredible. I trailed my fork through the maple syrup Ari had picked up since it was my favorite. And I thought about him, Ari, everything that he'd done, everything that happened, everything. I knew what he'd done wasn't normal. It didn't fit into society's idea of right and wrong, but had it really been that bad? It had been over the top, crazy, possessive, but bad? Would I have given Ari a chance with Clark in my ear every second, hammering me with I love yous and guilt into the familiar? I wasn't sure. Thinking about the scared ghost of the girl that I'd been that day when Ari had walked into the restaurant, rearranging my entire life like a shooting star in the cosmos, I don't know if I ever would have been brave enough to be with him. Yeah, sure, whatever. Okay, you guys tell me how you feel about this. Hey, comment down below. Hey, if you made it this far in the video, can you like, comment, subscribe, you know, that all that normal stuff. I don't ever self-promo, but for the love of God, this is rough. I actually genuinely would love for you to comment about how you're feeling about the book so far, because it's still gonna get worse. We only have like 2 chapters left, and it's about to get even crazier and worse than you think. As she's having this epiphany, she's going through the day, and she's having a great time. All of a sudden, there's a knock at the door, and it is the divorce attorney that he had hired for her. And the divorce attorney's like, hey, you didn't call the office, so I figured that, you know, we would just come by. I'm like, girl, it has been like 3 hours. What you mean? You expected her to make that phone call that quickly? So that was a little bit red flaggy, right? That this lady's already showing up so immediately. And the divorce lawyer's going through it, and she's like, yeah, you know, he's offered to like give a settlement, and you can have like $10 million in the divorce, but you can have anything that you want. Like, he said you can take anything. She says, I don't want the money. I don't want the money. I don't want anything from him. I just want this like annulled, pretty much. And as she's reviewing these papers, I stared at the documents in shock, my eyes scanning the unfamiliar name on the divorce papers. This isn't the right name, I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. My maiden name is Blake Shepfield. She furrowed her brows, flipping through the paperwork before producing another set of documents. She showed me a legal declaration of the Shepfield's adoption had been declared null and void. Mr. Lancaster said he took care of this, she inquired, her tone laced with confusion. So she realizes what Ari had done. I'd always let life happen to me. I'd gone through the motions, accepting all the crap it threw at me, and then it decided to give me Ari Lancaster, my fucking soulmate, and I was gonna fuck it all up. Yeah, he was a stalker, and questionable, and he'd done terrible things to ensure that he and I were together, but he also possessed the most beautiful soul of anyone that I'd ever met, and he was offering me all of it. What the fuck was I doing? Girl. So then she talks to the divorce attorney, and she's like, I gotta go find him. I'm not signing any of this. This isn't happening anymore. Pack it up, lady. I gotta find him. Divorce attorney's like, yeah, I think he had like a flight at 7 p.m. tonight at LAX, so it's like 5 p.m. You got 2 hours if you want to try and catch him. She runs to the garage. Her car won't start. She runs outside. She tries to get an Uber. Uber says it'll be 15 minutes. Then suddenly it gets canceled, and she's like, oh no. Tries to get another Uber. It's also going to be another 15 minutes. But she texts him, right? She's trying to call him. He's not picking up on any of her phone calls. She texts him, we're not breaking. You said you wouldn't let us, and I'm saying it now. You're mine, Ari Lancaster. You'd better not get on that fucking plane. And then there was a shift in the air, and I knew without even seeing him. My breath hitched, and I lifted my gaze from my phone to the end of the driveway. And there stood Ari, a wind-swept constellation I was desperate to see. You didn't leave. Nope. You blocked my ex. I did. You planted drugs in his car to get rid of him? Yep. You got him on the no-fly list. Mm-hmm. And I'd do it again. You're crazy about me, aren't you, Ari Lancaster? Fucking insane for you, sunshine. Good, because I figured out I'm crazy for you, too. It's about time, baby, but I would have waited forever. But thank fuck I didn't have to. Ugh! Then he picks her up and carries her inside. I hate everything. I genuinely hate everything. Chapter 26. We have 2 chapters left. They get into the foyer of the house. I stared up at him, and for the first time in weeks, there was no doubt. It was like it had washed away, disappeared like the lipsticks. like the lipstick stains down the drain, and somehow I knew it. I knew it was never going to come back. He was it for me. Maybe he could be a hero and a villain at the same time, just like I could be. And maybe it was what worked for us. Maybe it was the only thing that would work when you had someone with so much still to work through like I did. But at least I was finally working through it. And then it's a bunch of spice, a bunch of I love yous and like getting back together. And she sees his, what the? I leaned forward. My eyes were playing tricks. Was that a ring attached to the tip of... It's not just a ring. A smooth gold of it really resembled a... You like my wedding ring? He said proudly, swinging his... like a fucking helicopter. Got it on our wedding night. Seemed fitting, don't you think? You have a wedding ring pierced through the tip of your... I said slowly, because really it wasn't something that you saw every day. Or ever, actually. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good... I'm over here like fighting demons. What? From Ari's perspective, she fell asleep on his chest, and he's so happy, and they found peace, and he's like overjoyed with this. They're back together. From the moment that I laid eyes on Blake as a young boy, I'd known that she was it. There was an unexplainable pull, an undeniable force that drew her to me. She was my very own kryptonite, and once I'd made that decision that I couldn't live without her, I'd also made her the only person that could actually destroy me. I couldn't live without her. And once I had that firmly established in my personal values, every step after that had not only been necessary, but the only step I could take. I would never let her go. Leaving the Cobras mid-season? Yeah, that was never gonna happen. When I made a commitment, I went all in. Letting her divorce me? Also never gonna happen. But I had needed a come-to-Jesus moment where Blake realized that she was just as in this as I was, that she couldn't let go either. And that had required a little push. So I'd hired an actress to pose as a divorce attorney, and I'd had a friend put together fake papers that had no legal validity. She could have signed those fucking things a million times and she still would have been married to me. If she had for some reason requested to take them to court herself, I'd have a plant in there too and would have pretended it was all real. There'd been a million contingencies that I had set up, but they all had one end goal: to get her back. He had removed one of the gaskets in her car, knowing that she might try to take it, so that way she couldn't leave. And then same thing, he had hacked her phone and canceled the Uber so that she couldn't leave either. Oh my, it was all planned. I want to cry. I want to cry so bad. I don't know why. I just, it's so bad. Every time you're like, oh, maybe he's doing a little better. Like, oh, maybe this is like actually a good thing and he's actually being a decent human being. And then it's just shattered entirely. The way she said it was different now. Like, she'd finally found her peace with it. The fact that she'd found her soulmate at 10 and then I'd made sure that we were reunited. I would do anything to keep us together forever. I love you so much it hurts, I told her, and it was the truth. Our love was a living, breathing, painful thing. Because having someone else own your soul was always going to be a painful, beautiful experience. One I wouldn't trade for anything. One I would fight for with my very last breath. And finally, I knew Blake was going to fight for it too. In chapter 27, months later, it is the night of the last game to determine if they're going to make it into the playoffs or not. The Dallas Knights are also having a similar game, like they're at the same exact time that they're battling to see if they make it into the playoffs or not. So he calls Lincoln. They have a little bit more bromance talk before their games, like encouraging each other. And it's revealed that he got his thing stuck in her thing. He called Lincoln before he called 911 to ask for help. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't want to talk about it. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Lincoln asks, Are you still coming home? He sounded so un-Daniels-like, a name usually synonymous with cocky badass. It was hilarious. Ari? Sorry, what did you ask? Fuck you, he growled. Yes, Link, your Snookums is still planning on coming home. There was a long silence, almost like my buddy was having trouble holding back his emotions. Snookums? He finally said, sounding infinitely happier than he had before my answer. Not good? I'll keep workshopping. I was smiling weirdly into the phone, but it was warranted. Lincoln Daniels was going to be my best friend forever. They hang up. Walker overheard it, and Walker's like, Did he say good luck to me? Did he say hi to me? It's very cute. What do you know? They play Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, and the whole team dances together and gets ready for the game, and they end up winning. Yay! Cut to Blake's perspective, and everybody is celebrating at the arena that night. They sneak away to go and do spicy stuff in one of the little hallways. And as they're doing so, turning my head towards the direction of the sound, I froze because one of the last people on Earth I would have expected to see standing at the end of the hall was staring at us. It was Clark. He'd still been texting me constantly, but I'd blocked his number for real this time. I didn't want anything to do with the past. The therapist that I'd started going to had helped me work through the guilt that I felt when it came to Clark. I didn't have to stay with someone out of guilt. I could understand that now, thanks to the weekly sessions. Clark may have been my past, but Ari was my past and my future. Clark is just staring at them, and she doesn't stop. I didn't tell Ari he was there. I suddenly wanted to make a point, just like Ari would have wanted, that I didn't belong to my past or my guilt or anything else. I belonged to Ari, and that was it. So they go on, just having spice. She just keeps checking back and making eye contact with Clark. Doesn't say a word. That is so shitty. I feel so bad for the dude. When they're done doing it, Ari says, I didn't know you were into exhibitionism, Sunshine. I think you made your point quite nicely, Blake, and anytime you want to F me to prove a point, I'm your man. Just as long as I'm your man all the other times, too. Always, I murmured, and I'd never meant something more. Ugh! Chapter 28. This is the last chapter. We finally made it, guys. We survived. At the end of the book, they got out after one round in the playoffs. So, that sucks. But it is confirmed he will be going back to Dallas the following season, and Walker is going to come as well and go and be goalie for them. So our third book is going to be Walker living in Dallas, being a little Dallas Knight. So that's kind of cool, I guess. Let me know if you want me to read it. I kind of want to. Let me know, though, if that's something that you'd be interested in. The only other thing that he can think of to, make this perfect is that he wants to propose to Blake properly. Right? He knows that he messed up and he's trying to atone for his actions. He plans a surprise date for her to the Griffith Observatory, and she's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. They go on little random dates all the time, and she's really thinking nothing of it. But I haven't gone stargazing since I left the group home. I think it hurt too much because I associated it with you. I was a cheesy fucker back then, wasn't I? You're still a cheesy fucker, but I love it. She has a flashback to her asking him when she was a kid, Ari, do you think I'm going to be sad forever? Words from the past hit me hard. Blake, are you alright? I'm not sad anymore. What? I'm not sad anymore. When we were stargazing as little kids, I asked if you had thought that it would last forever. And all this time, it has, but it's gone now. You did it. I don't think I can take all the credit, Sunshine. And it was crazy that was true. Since that day where I'd started to take control of my life, I hadn't self-harmed or had my eating disorder. I hadn't even weighed myself. I'd told myself I was perfect every single day in the mirror, whether Ari was inside of me or not. Oh my God. I'd gone to therapy every week faithfully, even when it sucked or hurt. I had shown up for myself every day, and of course Ari had showed up for me too. 9 months ago, I'd been in the wrong life with the wrong guy, and I hadn't realized any of it. Ari Lancaster was proof that miracles and soulmates existed, and I said thank you to the heavens every night that he'd seen that billboard that day and moved heaven and earth to find me. Every tear, every cut, every ache, it had somehow brought us here. And as the great Taylor Swift said, all's well that ends well to end up with the pucking right guy. Shut the fuck up. I don't know what to do with my hands. What are you talking about? Okay, that's fine. Whatever. The book ends. There's an epilogue. I'm not fucking reading it. I don't care. You can read it on your own. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you care. Oh my God. Oh, but also, hey, if you do choose to read this book on Kindle Unlimited, just know, I cut out a lot of self-harming stuff. It's very graphic, a little triggering. I'm not gonna front. Anyway. Oh my God, what was this book, dude? All's well that ends well to end up with the right pucking guy. That's so stupid. Oh my God. Okay, what do I rate the book? Probably a 2. It wasn't bad. We got a proper disclaimer at the beginning, which I liked. Like I said, I'm not going to judge it for the crazy shit and the antics that happened because she said that it wasn't cool. That's all I ask for in these dark romances, homie. Just acknowledge that what is happening is crazy. And I'm fine. I'm not going to dock points for any of that nonsense. I will dock it points for the amount of Taylor Swift that happened. Look, man, I love Folklore. I love Evermore. I'm a huge fan of those albums. Those are, my number one listen to in, 2021 and 2020, but that was excessive. It was a little cringy. They used the word shook. It was a little too on the nose of, oh, look at this, modern slang and so hip that just felt kind of out of place and weird. what was the other critique? Yeah, that he felt like two different people. It felt like an extension of Lincoln's character, or maybe actions that were in the rough cut, like the rough draft of what Lincoln would have done, and then it was just rolled into this book and slapped a new main male character on the top of it with a different personality. Like, it felt very jarring between, like, his actions and then his, like, words in a way that felt discombobulated, not on purpose. Oh, she was so fucking stupid. I hate reading about stupid women. Or women that just, like, don't think for themselves, which is what was happening throughout that entire book. That was infuriating. She didn't know who Ari was? What do you mean? And you didn't even ask? That's crazy, girl. You crazy girl. So, yeah, I probably a 2. Like I said, it wasn't egregious. Definitely not a 1. But even a 3. 3 means that I would recommend it to somebody, and I don't think I would really recommend that to people, unless you just want to read spice, because there was a lot of spice in that. And if you really like hockey, because there was a lot of hockey in that, too. Which I guess it's a dark hockey romance. You get those two things. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, if you liked the first book, okay, man, keep reading. Like I said, I kind of want to read the third one. Just for the drama of it all. You know what I mean? It's just so, like, it is fun. It's a fun, goofy read. It's just not a good read. Does that make sense? It's like a, you know how, like, if you watch, like, TLC, like, I used to love 90 Day Fiancé, not because it was a good show, but just because that shit was crazy. That's how I feel about these books. It's not because it's good. It's just because it's funny. It keeps me on my toes. Anyway, I think that's all that I have to say. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. I have memberships on the channel now. I also have a Patreon. All that stuff is linked below if you're interested in supporting the channel additionally. I just hit 2,000 subscribers. I am so thankful for you guys. Absolutely blown my mind with the support, and I'm so appreciative of you. And Spotify is in my description box too, if it's easier for you to watch this stuff on Spotify. I think that's all I have to say. I think that's all of my self-promoting that I need to do. Like I said, comment below if you want me to read the third one in this, or if there's any other book that you think I would enjoy, or that you want me to do a rant review on. I don't know, just let me know what's going on, guys. Okay. I guess that's it. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!